As we have from the Ministry of Defense, and this is from Sunday, we have been seeing more missiles and drones.
Well, good morning. We just finished an update with Admiral Brad Cooper, the CENTCOM commander, across the CENTCOM AOR.
They have waged war against civilization itself. Our resolve, and likewise that of Israel, has never been stronger. America is now, again, the richest, most powerful nation in the world by far. But the only reason we enjoy the quality of life that we do and the freedom and security is we have done things that others are unable to do. But it's because of warriors who are willing to lay down their lives to do battle with our enemies. And they do battle better than anybody. An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be a dire threat to every American. We cannot allow a nation that raises terrorist armies to possess such weapons that would allow them to extort the world to their evil will. Not going to let it happen. We're not happening to us, and we're not going to let it happen to others. The United States has the strongest military the world has ever seen. I rebuilt our military in my first term. There's never been a military like we possess. And frankly, there's nobody even close, but we are now using that military for good. We want to have it for good purpose. We're undertaking this massive operation not merely to ensure security for our own time and place, but for our children and their children, just as our ancestors have done for us many, many years ago. This is the duty and the burden of a free people. These actions are right, and they are necessary to ensure that Americans will never have to face a radical, bloodthirsty terrorist regime armed with nuclear weapons and lots of threats. For almost 50 years, these wicked extremists have been attacking the United States while chanting the slogan, "Death to America," or "Death to Israel," or both. They are the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. We are the world's greatest and most powerful nation, so we can do something about what they do. These intolerable threats will not continue any longer. I once again urge the Revolutionary Guard, the Iranian military and police, to lay down your arms and receive full immunity or face certain death. It will be certain death. Won't be pretty. I call upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you. I made a promise to you, and I fulfilled that promise. The rest will be up to you, but we'll be there to help. Thank you. God bless you to our incredible warriors, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
That was the very latest statement from President Trump as he shared those remarks last night. This morning, we do have an update for you, and this is from CENTCOM, stating that as of 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time, March 2nd, this morning, 4 U.S. service members have been killed in action. The 4th service member, who was seriously wounded during Iran's initial attacks, eventually succumbed to their injuries. Major combat operations continue, and our response effort is ongoing. The identities of the fallen are being withheld until 24 hours after next of kin notification. We are continuing to follow all of the very latest developments as Operation Epic Fury continues. We'll be back in a moment. We are continuing to follow an update as Operation Epic Fury continues. And I wanted to share this. This is from the U.S. military. New information stating that at 11:03 p.m. Eastern Time, March 1st, so late last night, 3 U.S. F-15E Strike Eagles flying in support of Operation Epic Fury went down over Kuwait due to an apparent friendly fire incident. During active combat that included attacks from Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles, and drones, the U.S. Air Force fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti air defenses. All 6 aircrew ejected safely, have been safely recovered, and are in stable condition. Kuwait has acknowledged this incident, and we are grateful for the efforts of Kuwaiti Defense Forces and their support in this ongoing operation. The cause of the incident is under investigation. Additional information will be released as it comes available. So I did want to share this video. This is from Kuwait, from when this all happened, as 3 American fighter jets were mistakenly downed by friendly Kuwaiti fire during an Iranian air assault. That is according to the U.S. military this morning. All 6 crew members safely ejected from the F-15E Strike Eagles. They were in stable condition after being recovered. An attack by Iranian aircraft, missiles, and drones was underway at the time the planes were shot down. Now, Iranian state television claimed that Iran had targeted one of the U.S. planes that crashed in Kuwait, but they did not elaborate. Explosions could be heard as one of those planes fell from the sky in flames. That's according to one of the witnesses on scene. Kuwait said its air defenses had accidentally shot down the jets as part of its support of the U.S. combat operation in Iran. So we did want to share the very latest as Kuwait mistakenly shot down some U.S. warplanes. Meanwhile, we are continuing to get reaction from leaders around the world. I did want to let you know, coming up at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, so in just about 30 minutes, we are expecting to receive another update from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Yesterday, he also had some brief remarks about the ongoing developments in Iran. Let's play those out right now.
Yesterday, I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. Over the last 2 days, Iran has launched sustained attacks across the region, at citizens in the region, residents, families on holiday, and those in transit. I ask all our people in the region to please register your presence and follow Foreign Office travel advice. I know this is a deeply worrying time, and we will continue to do all we can to support you. Our armed forces, who are located across the region, are also being put at risk by Iran's actions. Yesterday, Iran hit a military base in Bahrain, narrowly missing British personnel. The death of the supreme leader will not stop Iran from launching these strikes. Their approach is becoming even more reckless and more dangerous to civilians. Our decision that the UK would not be involved with the strikes on Iran was deliberate, not least because we believe that the best. But Iran is striking British interests nonetheless and putting British people at huge risk, along with our allies across the region. That is the situation we face today. Our partners in the Gulf have asked us to do more to defend them, and it is my duty to protect British lives. We have British jets in the air as part of coordinated defensive operations, which have already successfully intercepted Iranian strikes. But the only way to stop the threat is to destroy the missiles at source, in their storage depots, or the launchers which are used to fire the missiles. The United States has requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose. We have taken the decision to accept this request to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, killing innocent civilians, putting British lives at risk. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. We're not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region. And we will also bring experts from Ukraine together with our own experts to help Gulf partners shoot down Iranian drones attacking them. I want to be very clear. We all remember the mistakes of Iraq, and we have learned those lessons. We were not involved in the initial strikes on Iran, and we will not join offensive action now. But Iran is pursuing a scorched earth strategy, so we are supporting the collective self-defense of our allies and our people in the region, because that is our duty to the British people. It is the best way to eliminate the urgent threat and prevent the situation spiralling further. This is the British government protecting British interests and British lives.
That was the very latest from British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, as he stated that the U.S. can use British bases against Iran. He also stated that the United Kingdom will not take part in offensive strategies, but will in defensive strategies right there. We once again did want to let you know that coming up at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, we are expecting to hear once again from UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer as he addresses the world on the developments in Iran. We also are continuing to keep a very close eye on the White House, as coming up at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, President Trump will be participating in a Medal of Honor ceremony, and we are also hearing that he will also be addressing the issue of Operation Epic Fury at that time as well. We are going to be bringing you this live event in its entirety that is scheduled to begin at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We are going to head for a brief break, but before we do so, stating that I am in direct coordination with our federal intelligence and law enforcement partners as we continue to closely monitor and thwart any potential threats to the homeland. So we are continuing to follow all of those developments. This, as the FBI is continuing to investigate a shooting that happened in Austin, Texas yesterday. As well, after the break, we are going to be talking with a former DHS senior advisor on the latest developments, Chuck Marino. That conversation coming up in just a moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. I did want to share this live look with you. This is out of Beirut, Lebanon, as the Israeli military says that it has killed the head of Hezbollah's intelligence headquarters. We continue to see plumes of smoke there in the skyline as this is a live look in Beirut, Lebanon. This as Hezbollah and Israel continue to trade strikes. Meanwhile, closer to home, I wanted to share this with you. This is from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem stating that I am in direct coordination with our federal intelligence and law enforcement partners as we continue to closely monitor and thwart any potential threats to the homeland. To speak more on this, I do want to bring in Chuck Marino, who is a former DHS senior advisor, to talk more on the threats that DHS is closely continuing to follow. And Chuck, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Good to be with you.
So I did want to start off with an investigation underway right now in the United States out of Austin, Texas, as the FBI is looking into a shooting that happened at a bar over the weekend as a potential terror attack. And the suspect in that attack, and I'm going to bring that up for our viewers right now, was wearing a shirt that could indicate possible ties to Iran. And I did want to share that with our viewers right here. This is what they provided. This is a still image of the suspect saying property of Allah. And then underneath, they were stating that there was a T-shirt there as well. As we continue to watch all of the developments and the retaliation continue to unfold after the initial strike of Operation Epic Fury, here at home, what is DHS really closely taking a look at?
Well, there's a lot going on at DHS and over at the Department of Justice with the FBI and other law enforcement and intelligence agencies. And that is that within the United States, we have been infiltrated over the last administration under the Biden administration for allowing over 180 different countries into the United States, many times being unvetted. And the other dynamic of this is that you may have those that are in the country legally, to include American citizens as well, that may be susceptible to becoming radicalized on this Islamic radical ideology and may align themselves with countries like Iran.
And Chuck, let's talk about two separate entities of this topic. We're talking about the potential for sleeper cells, but there's also the concern for lone wolf attacks. Can you differentiate the two for our viewers and kind of share with us what those concerns for both of those are?
Yeah, I think right now the concern with organized groups, including, the possibility of terrorist cells, is that they've entered the United States and have been lying dormant until they become activated. This can be a cell, for example, comprised of Hezbollah, which, as you know, is one of the proxies of Iran. And could become active and act independently amongst each other, which makes it very hard for law enforcement to detect. And then you've got these lone wolf actors, which potentially this actor in Austin, Texas, could have been, that really don't communicate with many others, if anyone at all, and then decide to go out and take that action against American citizens. And those are also equally hard to detect. So law enforcement certainly has their work cut out for them in both of these cases. And it makes the landscape here within the United States very complex. I would say that our threat level is certainly at a minimum elevated right now, which is why the statement that you read from Secretary Noem at DHS is not surprising and also very important.
And no doubt DHS and other law enforcement agencies are always closely monitoring any potential threat, but that level has been heightened. What are the communications happening right now, and what can you share with us in terms of the strategies and methods that are now being implemented to thwart any such threat?
Well, I think based on the totality of some of the things that I've spoken about, the operating assumption from law enforcement at all levels, federal, state, and local, is that the country has been infiltrated and that the threats are already here inside our borders. And I think that's the correct operating assumption. I think we've seen previous examples of how that has jeopardized the homeland security of the country. And so going forward, these law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies are already operating at that elevated level. There are other steps that the Department of Homeland Security could take with respect to the American public, and that is if they were to formally raise the threat level here in the country to elevated under the National Terrorism Advisory System. This is the system that replaced the old color-coded threat level system here in the United States. I was part of the small team that oversaw the implementation of that new program, and it's designed to communicate as much as possible with the American people so that they can become involved in their overall safety and security, and also become a force multiplier for these law enforcement and intelligence agencies, utilizing the concept of the program, see something, say something, by reporting anything that may look out of the ordinary.
And I did want to share this. This is with our Fox 7 Austin team, just to encapsulate the ongoing investigation into the shooting that happened over the weekend. 3 people, including the gunman, were killed and 14 others were wounded in a mass shooting outside a bar in Austin's bustling 6th Street Entertainment District early Sunday morning that authorities said may have ties to terrorism. And Chuck, as we continue to take a look at this, I did want to ask you, because this is maybe perhaps a more traditional attack in which there is an actual person going out in public and committing an act of terror. But now we've seen the landscape of terror change. We've seen, cyber attacks, the use of artificial intelligence. As these attacks and terror attacks continue to evolve, how has the strategies with DHS and other agencies also evolved to monitor any potential threats on those levels?
Well, they're certainly paying attention in the area of cyber. Iran, for example, and its proxies are known to try and leverage cyber attacks against the United States. You've got the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, which falls under the Department of Homeland Security, also working with the Secret Service and FBI, who are both expert agencies in cyber investigations, as well as critical infrastructure such as our water systems, electrical grids. These are all susceptible to becoming victims of a terrorist attack. We always say that if you want to, hit the United States or any other country, the first place that an adversary would seek to exploit and damage would be the power and the water supply to a country. That would immediately impact the American public as well as anybody's population. So these things have to be protected. Many of them now are obviously controlled by cyber. And so a cyber attack would be certainly the easiest way for an adversary to attempt to take these systems down. And we've got to make sure that these are impenetrable.
You know, you were talking about the DHS always monitoring any potential threats, and that means, you know, monitoring physical activity or perhaps activity online, you know, the physical footprint and also the digital footprint. How does one monitor to thwart a cyber attack? You know, what are the strategies that are implemented in that respect?
Well, these are going on not just in a time of crisis, but on a daily basis. And so the majority of critical infrastructure is run by the private sector. It's not run by the government or by states and cities. So as a result, DHS and the Department of Justice are continually working with these private sector entities that run, for example, the electrical grids to make sure that there's that constant communication, that constant sharing of best practices when it comes to protecting the cyber infrastructure, for example. And any anomalies are reported immediately. Some legislation has been changed in the past to force this mechanism to make sure that reporting is done in a timely manner if any of these anomalies are detected, so that federal authorities could come in and assist these private entities with resolving and further preventing any cause for concern from taking down these vital resources.
Let's also talk about the human aspect. And you were talking about, you know, the psychological profiles when something of this sort were to happen. There's now a vacuum of power. Iran's supreme leader has been killed along with 40 top leaders. And this creates a vacuum. When we talk about terrorist organizations with this chaos, does that typically embolden them to go out and commit acts immediately? What is the psychological profile that law enforcement agencies, DHS, is taking a look at this particular moment in time?
Well, they don't know what the trigger may have been put in place by a place like Iran and its proxies to take action. It may have been exactly what we see carrying out right now. It could have been military attack, decapitating leadership to then go out and take action. So I think law enforcement takes into account the possibility that, look, should the United States have taken action and been successful, as we have been, at eliminating the leadership there, although it's not complete yet, you still have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, for example, still refusing to surrender, still going in the direction and following through in their loyalty to the Ayatollah Khomeini. And so, you know, the triggering event could very well have already taken place. So what is going on? This is what keeps law enforcement up at night, keeps them concerned. And as I said, it's why you're seeing federal, state, and local agencies already shifting to that elevated threat level, regardless of DHS coming out and formally doing so. I think the last administrative step, if you will, is to now pull the American people up to that same level, because we want to make sure that the American people also are paying attention to what's going on here and the ramifications here in the country. And one of those ramifications, by the way, is that, you know, radicalization used to take place by somebody having to jump on a plane and traveling to a special interest location or going online and following, you know, a terrorist organization and their ideologies. Well, now it can take place here in the United States. We have such a large immigration population, in many cases illegally, unfortunately, under the Biden administration, that these communities have segregated themselves from the rest of American society. And as a result, they are not assimilating to the culture here in America, the norms in America, the laws of America, and radicalization becomes much easier now in many of our major cities.
Chuck, before we let you go, is there any particular aspect as we take a look at the days, weeks, and even months to come that you're taking a very close eye on from the perspective as having been with the DHS?
Well, I can tell you that when I recommend that DHS raise the threat level to elevated, they are able to do so in increments. I would say that the minimum that they should do is 60 days. Raise the threat level for 60 days, reassess based on what's going on, because there's no sign that the military action is going to wane here until we, and along with Israel and our other allies, achieve the degrading of those that still remain within Iran that are loyal to the supreme leader who was killed in the attacks, along with other senior leadership. So there is the potential that this gets worse before it gets better, and I think that principle needs to apply to here at home as well. And so we need to be prepared. The American public needs to be prepared. As I said earlier, needs to be involved in their own security and needs to report anything for law enforcement. An agency like the FBI is not going to be able to do all this on their own. No agency can. So the public's going to play a pivotal role in helping to keep the homeland safe. And unfortunately, we're behind the curve right now with the threats from around the world that were allowed to come in to the United States under the previous administration, and that puts us at a significant disadvantage.
And Chuck, when you mentioned raising the threat level, what specifically does that mean in terms of changing in behavior, changing in operations and strategy from the perspective of the government?
Well, there are a lot of forcing mechanisms that come along with increasing that threat level. It forces many federal, state, and local and military agencies to adapt, I would say, more stringent protective measures across their enterprises. And again, it also pulls the American people up to a higher level. You know, many of these state and local agencies, many private sector companies have now aligned their own internal risk management, crisis management programs to be aligned with the National Terrorism Advisory System. And that is, if there is a change in this, and there's two levels under this system, there's elevated and there's imminent. Imminent being you've got specific, credible intelligence that an attack is certain within the near future. And then their internal security protocols will then go into effect. So the National Terrorism Advisory System essentially turns into a triggering event for those in the private sector, those at state and local levels, to take additional steps to safeguard themselves, maybe critical infrastructure in their communities. And so everybody is in a much better place because they're now aligned with this system.
All right, Chuck Marino, a former DHS senior advisor, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks, Stephanie.
And I did want to share this with you as you are taking a live look at the White House. We did want to share with you in just about 30 minutes time, we are expecting to hear from President Trump as he gives another update on Operation Epic Fury. His original schedule was that he was going to be participating in a Medal of Honor ceremony. As we understand it, that is also expected to take place, but he will be addressing the developments in Iran as well. We are going to be bringing this to you in its entirety. This is scheduled for 11 a.m. Eastern time, so in just about half an hour. We'll be right back.
Israelis are now targeting Hezbollah, so it's clearly on the table. So yeah, no real military end state. So it's really hard to say, how close or not are they to achieving their objectives when we don't know what the objectives are.
Yeah, and President Trump has talked about, for example, hasn't he, something like a Venezuela situation where a member of the existing regime becomes the new leader. But then he said some of those people, some of those individuals they were looking at have been killed in the Israeli-US strikes. He's also talked about, continuing to work with the regime in some way, despite all of that, as well as calling on the people, the Iranian people, to take over and create something new. Talk to us a little bit more about the capabilities of Iran then, because obviously at the moment the US forces are focused on Iran. So is Israel, although it's also dealing with some of Iran's proxies in other parts of the region.
Yeah, I think the major concern for the US, and that's why it's been highlighted as one of the objectives that's remained consistent, is Iran's ability to produce ballistic missiles. It has the largest volume and the biggest diverse ballistic missile capability inside the Middle East. And it's not just about targeting the missiles, it's about targeting the logistical supply chain. So ammonium perchlorate, for example, we know that comes in from China on tankers into Iranian ports. That then goes up to a facility near Tehran, and that's used for the solid fuel propellant for these ballistic missiles. That's obviously a key component in degrading and destroying Iran's ballistic missiles. However, what the US have, what the region has, are counter-ballistic missile defenses such as Patriot and terminal high-altitude air defense. That's called THAAD. And they're pretty good at taking out ballistic missiles. The big worry for me as a planner would be, how do you defend against Iran's hypersonic missile capability? Hypersonic missile is a missile that goes beyond Mach 5, which is 5 times the speed of sound. They have a Fata 1 capability, which goes hypersonic in the terminal phase, and they have a Fata 2, which is more capable. There is an idea that it would have what's called a hypersonic glide vehicle, which is basically the warhead in a hypersonic glide vehicle that when it separates from the booster, instead of following a parabolic trajectory, which makes it easier to target, it can steer itself. And I think I'm starting to see video footage, especially over Tel Aviv, that suggests that hypersonics are being brought into play. That's a worry because it's really hard to counter them. And then the second one is the Shaheds.
Yes, I was just about to ask you about that, because a lot of people are looking at Iran and asking how is it calibrating its response. Maybe they'll come on to those missiles you were just talking about. But right now, the concern around the Shaheds.
Yeah, so what we can see on screen here, Anita, is this is the Shahed 136. It's an Iranian blueprint. It's about 3.5 meters long, travels at 120 miles an hour, and contains a 20 to 60 kilogram warhead. That's important because you can change the weight of the warhead, and if you make it heavier, it reduces the range. If you make it lighter, it increases the range of the Shahed. But what's kind of concerning is that these Shaheds have been used on Ukraine for the last 4 years. There were 60,000 of these launched by Russia in 2025, and there's over 12,000 in 2026. Iran's capability to make these is significant, and I've seen video footage and image stills of them underground, which makes them harder to target. When you start putting these up in multiple numbers, then the ability for Persian countries and the US to be able to target multiple drones is seriously degraded, and we're seeing that. We're seeing drones come through. Now, this is really important because there is the civilian population in the Persian states. There's lots of tourism there. We're seeing these drones go into high-rise buildings, into resorts. They've done significant damage to the Fifth Fleet, the US Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. And what we're using at the moment is a conventional capability, such as a jet, with a conventional missile that's used for taking out other aircraft normally. We're now sort of seeing these being used, which is what's happening with the Typhoons in Akrotiri, from a conventional perspective to take out a drone. And we call it the cost-benefit ratio. The cost of one of those missiles is called an ASRAM, short-range air-to-air missile, is about £300,000. A drone's about 20,000, and a Typhoon can carry 4. So if you've got 10 drones, you can see there's a predicament.
Mikey, for the moment, thank you very much. I'm going to pause that conversation and go to our political correspondent, Harry Farley in Westminster, because we think we're going to be hearing from the UK Prime Minister very shortly. And Harry, criticism coming from multiple fronts towards Sir Keir Starmer. So the task, I guess, when he faces the House of Commons, we think in the next few minutes, is to try to explain and defend the UK's position with regards to what's been happening in Cyprus, what communications the UK government has been having with Cyprus, also the use of those bases, both here in the UK and on the Chagos Islands. Diego Garcia.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Often at these big foreign policy moments, the House of Commons stands relatively united. Not always. That doesn't always happen. That didn't happen, for example, for David Cameron when he was asking the question about strikes in Libya. But there are often key moments like this where the House of Commons is fairly united. Think back to Tony Blair in 2003 when he asked for the House of Commons support to back the US in its invasion of Iraq. The Conservatives supported them. That is not the case for Sir Keir Starmer today. He faces criticism to his left from the Liberal Democrats and from the freshly invigorated Green Party in particular, criticising him for letting the US use those British bases, albeit belatedly, saying that the UK risks being dragged into a wider war in the region. And then criticism from the right in the Conservatives and Reform UK, saying he should have allowed the US strikes the initial strikes that took place over the weekend to take place from British bases such as Diego Garcia in the Chagos Islands, as well as RAF Fairford in the UK. So criticism from both sides.
Harry, apologies, I'm going to interrupt you because Sir Keir Starmer is just beginning to speak.
On the situation in Iran and the wider region and our response. Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom was not involved in the initial strikes on Iran by the US and Israel. That decision was deliberate. We believe that the best way forward for the region and for the world is a negotiated settlement in which Iran agrees to give up any aspirations to develop a nuclear weapon and ceases its destabilising activity across the region. That has been the long-standing position of successive British governments. President Trump has expressed his disagreement with our decision not to get involved in the initial strikes. But it is my duty to judge what is in Britain's national interest. That is what I've done, and I stand by it. But, Mr. Speaker, it is clear that Iran's outrageous response has become a threat to our people, our interests and our allies, and it cannot be ignored. Iran has lashed out across the region. They've launched hundreds of missiles and thousands of drones at countries which did not attack them, including the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Iraq, Bahrain and Oman. And overnight, Hezbollah, Iran's proxy in Lebanon, launched attacks on Israel, seeking to escalate the war. Mr. Speaker, there are an estimated 300,000 British citizens in the regions, residents, families on holiday, and those in transit. Iran has hit airports and hotels where British citizens are staying. It is deeply concerning for the whole House and the whole country. And, Mr. Speaker, our armed forces are also being put at risk by Iran's actions. On Saturday, Iran hit a military base in Bahrain with missiles and drones. There were 300 British personnel on the base, some within a few hundred yards of the strike. Last night, a drone hit RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. There were no casualties in this strike. Mr. Speaker, it is important for me to say that our bases in Cyprus are not being used by US bombers. The security of our friends and partners in Cyprus is of critical importance. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to be clear. The strike on RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus was not in response to any decision that we have taken. In our assessment, the drone was launched prior to our announcement. Iran's aggression towards Britain and our interests is long-standing, and that's why we've always ensured that protections for British bases and personnel are at their highest level. Mr. Speaker, it is very clear that the death of the Supreme Leader will not stop Iran from launching these strikes. In fact, their approach is becoming even more reckless and more dangerous to civilians. They are working ruthlessly and deliberately through a plan to strike not only military targets, but also economic targets in the region, with no regard for civilian casualties. That is the situation we face today, and to which we must respond. Mr. Speaker, I've been speaking to our Gulf partners over the weekend. They're outraged by Iran's acts, particularly as they played no part in any strikes, and they've asked us to do more to defend them. Moreover, it is my duty, the highest duty of my office, to protect British lives. That is why we put British jets in the air, Typhoons and F-35s, as part of coordinated defensive operations, which have already successfully intercepted Iranian strikes, including, Mr. Speaker, taking out one drone that was heading towards a coalition base in Iraq, housing UK service personnel. I want to pay tribute to our brilliant servicemen and women, putting themselves in harm's way to keep others safe. And I know the whole House will join me in expressing our gratitude and our respect. But, Mr. Speaker, it is simply not possible to shoot down every Iranian missile and every drone after they've been launched. The only way to stop the threat is to destroy the missiles at source, in their storage depots or at the launchers. The US requested permission to use British bases for that specific and limited defensive purpose, because they have the capabilities to do so. Yesterday evening, we took the decision to accept that new request in order to prevent Iran firing missiles across the region, killing innocent civilians, putting British lives at risk, and hitting countries that have not been involved. To be clear, the use of British bases is limited to the agreed defensive purposes. We are not joining the US and Israeli offensive strikes. The basis for our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. It is in accordance with international law, and we've produced a summary of our legal advice, which clearly sets this out. We will keep the decision under review. Mr. Speaker, we are not joining the strikes, but we will continue our defensive actions in the region. France and Germany are also prepared to enable US action to destroy Iran's capability to fire missiles and drones from source. I've been in close contact with President Macron and Chancellor Merz in recent days, as well as President Trump and leaders across the region to that end. Mr. Speaker, be in no doubt, the regime in Iran is utterly abhorrent. In January, they murdered thousands of their own people, the full horror of which is still hidden from the world. For decades, they have sought to destabilise the region and export terror around the world. Their proxies in Yemen have targeted British ships in the Red Sea. They facilitated Russia's attacks in Ukraine. The regime's tentacles have even reached these shores, posing a direct threat to Iranian dissidents and to the Jewish community. Over the last year alone, Iran has backed more than 20 potentially lethal attacks on UK soil, each of which, Mr. Speaker, we have foiled. So it's clear the Iranian regime must never be allowed to get their hands on nuclear weapons. That remains the primary aim of the United Kingdom and our allies, including the US. And ultimately, this will have to be achieved at the negotiating table. Mr. Speaker, in this dangerous moment, our first thoughts are with our citizens in the region, friends, family members and constituents. I recognise the deep concern that the situation is causing for for those involved and for communities across the country. We're asking all British citizens in the region to register their presence so we can provide the best possible support, and to monitor the Home Office travel advice, which is being regularly updated. Across much of the region, airspace remains closed, and local authorities are advising individuals to shelter in place. The situation on the ground may remain challenging for some time, so we're sending rapid deployment teams to the region to support our British nationals on the ground. And we're in close contact with the travel industry and governments in the region, including with our friends in the UAE, given the concentration of British nationals in that country. And we're looking at all options to support our people. We want to ensure that they can return home as swiftly and safely as possible. The FCDO phone lines are open to provide consular support, and ministers are available to meet MPs to discuss any individual cases. Mr. Speaker, we're also reaching out to communities across the United Kingdom, including Muslim and Jewish community organisations, and we're making sure that sites across the country, including places of worship, have appropriate protective security in place. Mr. Speaker, the situation in the region is developing rapidly, so we will continue to update the House in coming days. Mr. Speaker, I've spoken recently about the toll that global events are taking here at home. They come crashing into our lives with ever greater frequency, hitting our economy, driving up prices on the supermarket shelves or at the pump, dividing communities, bringing anxiety and fear. That's why how we operate on the world stage matters so much. Mr. Speaker, we all remember the mistakes of Iraq, and we have learned those lessons. Any UK actions must always have a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. I say again, we were not involved in the initial strikes on Iran, and we will not join offensive action now. But in the face of Iran's barrage of missiles and drones, we will protect our people in the region and support the collective self-defence of our allies, because that is our duty to the British people. It is the best way to eliminate the urgent threat, to prevent the situation spiralling further, and support a return to diplomacy. It is the best way to protect British interests and British lives. That is what this government is doing, and I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Bednall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement and for the security briefing I received earlier. This is a defining moment for the people of Iran, the wider Middle East and the world order. I know that hundreds of thousands of British people still in the region, many sheltering from drone attacks, are fearful about making it home. I agree with the Prime Minister that everyone in the region should follow FCDO advice and register their presence with the British Embassy. Can the Prime Minister confirm whether he is making contingency plans for a potential evacuation of UK citizens and what stage the operational planning is at? Let me also, Mr. Speaker, pay tribute to our brave service personnel stationed in British bases in the region. I know that this will be an anxious time for them and their families. They all have our support. Mr. Speaker, we stand in solidarity with our allies, including Bahrain, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, who, along with others, have been on the receiving end of unprovoked aggression. On Saturday, our allies, the United States and Israel, took targeted action against the Iranian regime, a regime which for decades has been brutally repressing its own citizens, whose leader had the blood of hundreds of thousands of Iranians on his hands and of countless others around the world killed by Iranian proxies. This regime is the world's foremost sponsor of international terrorism. It seeks to annihilate the world's only Jewish state. It has said so repeatedly, and we should take despots at their word. It is a regime whose apparatchiks chant death to Britain. It has attacked British nationals and conducted multiple plots on British soil, as the head of MI5 has warned. It is manufacturing drones en masse for Russia, drones which are raining down on innocent Ukrainians. And it continues to try to develop nuclear weapons in flagrant violation of international agreement, nuclear weapons which, if obtained, would be an existential threat for this country. The outcome of Ayatollah Khamenei's death will, we hope, be a safer Middle East and a safer world, with the future of Iran back in the hands of the Iranian people. But that outcome is not yet guaranteed. On Saturday, our allies in Canada and Australia immediately backed the action taken by America against this despotic regime in Tehran. And I have made it very clear that the Conservative Party also stands behind America taking this necessary action against state-sponsored terror. But over the weekend, statements from the government and the Prime Minister provided no such clarity. It was only last night that the Prime Minister finally told us that the government would allow our allies the use of our own air bases, despite it being obvious that UK interests were under imminent threat. It took Iranian missiles hitting allies in the Gulf before he finally made a decision. And even after that, the Foreign Secretary said this morning that the government has put limits on the actions of our allies operating from our bases. Unbelievably, in his statement today, the Prime Minister still cannot say whether he backs the strikes or not. Today, the President of the United States has taken the extraordinary step of rebuking the Prime Minister publicly, saying he took far too long to grant access. We are told that this dither and delay is because of concerns over international law, but I am afraid that explanation simply does not hold. International law didn't prevent our allies from clearly and unequivocally stating whose side they were on. You don't need international law to say whose side you're on. It has not prevented British governments in the past from supporting strikes which we knew to be right. As the Shadow Attorney General has said, if the doctrines of international law are unable to restrain Iranian terrorism and mass murder, if they tie the hands of democracies while forcing us to stand and watch Iranian atrocities, international law will have failed. It will have become a fundamentally immoral system of law. Why is it that under this Prime Minister, international law always seems to be at odds with our national interest? Why is it that we are giving away... Why is it that we are giving away the Chagos Islands and paying £35 billion for the privilege, rather than standing up for our national interest and protecting the crucial military base, which even now our allies are using? We in this House are elected to stand up for Britain's national interest, and where the government is doing the right thing, we will always back them. So let me reiterate our offer that if the government brings forward legislation to fast-track banning the IRGC, we will support them. But let me ask the Prime Minister, what national interest was served by refusing to help our allies for so long, particularly when we so need American support to protect Ukraine's and Europe's security? Are we going to see new UK military capabilities deployed to protect our security partners, our bases, including in Cyprus, and British nationals in the region? And will the Prime Minister ensure the Chancellor uses the Spring Statement tomorrow to set Britain on a clear path to 3% of GDP on defence spending? There is no point wanting action to make the world a safer place, but being too scared to do anything except stand by and watch others. Mr. Speaker, our national interest and national security must be front and centre. The Conservative Party will always work with our allies to make the world a safer place.
Mr. Speaker, she asked about contingency plans for UK nationals, and I can assure her and the House we're working at speed with our partners in the region to take whatever measures we can to make sure that our people can return as safely and as swiftly as possible, and will continue to do so. And I'm happy to update her and the House as we roll out those plans. Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. There were two distinct and separate decisions over the weekend. The first decision was whether or not the United Kingdom should join the US-Israel offensive against Iran. We took the decision that we should not. We should not.
Absolutely right.
The second decision was a separate decision, and actually a separate request from the US, which was whether we should permit the use of bases for the distinct, specific, defensive purpose of collective self-defence of our allies and to protect British lives, which were put at risk by the actions of Iran on Saturday and Sunday. We took the decision that we should do so. I am clear in my mind that any UK action must always have a lawful basis. It must also always have a viable and thought-through plan.
Yes.
And it must be in our national interest.
Yes.
The Leader of the Opposition, I think, is saying she would have joined the initial strikes whether they were lawful or not. I noticed she didn't say the Shadow Attorney General said they would have been lawful, just that the law should be changed.
Yes.
And I think she said they would have joined the initial strikes without regard to whether they had a plan. She was very critical of us not joining sooner. Therefore, it's impossible to have that position without arguing that we should and we could have joined. I fundamentally disagree. Mr. Speaker, I will tell the House why. Where our military personnel take action, putting their lives at risk, it is our duty, my duty, to ensure they have a lawful basis. Yeah. On Saturday, we deployed UK pilots into the sky in the region, and they've been working there ever since. They deserve to know that their actions are lawful and there is a viable, thought-through plan. And I will not countenance committing our military personnel to action which doesn't have a lawful basis. That is not a fair thing to do to our serving personnel. And no UK Prime Minister has ever committed our personnel to action unless it's got a proper, lawful basis.
In this Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornbury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Although the attack on Iran by the US and Israel was ill-advised, ill-judged and illegal, it is absolutely no excuse for the Iranians to recklessly bombard its Gulf neighbours. Yeah. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister, is he in a position to give us more details on what we're doing with our Ukrainian friends to support the collective self-defence of Arab nations against the Iranian Shahid drones that are causing so much damage in Ukraine and now in the Gulf?
Can I thank her for that question, because it is an important question. Ukraine, sadly, has more expertise than anyone in dealing with drones, and that's why we're putting their expertise and our expertise together and using it to help our allies in the region as they struggle with drones as we speak.
Sir Ed David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement for my security briefing. Once again, President Trump has launched a unilateral and unlawful act. Ayatollah Khamenei was a brutal dictator and a monstrous war criminal. He supported Hamas and their October the 7th atrocities, and he massacred thousands of his own people for daring to protest against decades of repression. I shed no tears for him. But instead I think of all the innocent Iranian civilians who have lost their lives. I think of the US service personnel killed in action our allies and partners in the region who are being outrageously targeted by Iran, and our British bases which have already faced attack. They did not choose this war. Donald Trump did, and he will bear responsibility for it. We have seen before what happens when an American president launches an illegal war with no idea how or when it is going to end, and we fear for what comes next. So in discussions with the White House, has the Prime Minister demanded to find out what Trump's plan is for what comes next? Does the Prime Minister understand that when he fails to stand up to Trump, especially when he breaks international law, it makes our country less safe? And how will the Prime Minister be sure that defensive operations from UK bases will not become offensive? And in rightly protecting our allies in the region, can we be assured by the Prime Minister that he won't follow Trump's lead down a slippery slope into a protracted conflict? And finally, Mr. Speaker, we rightly expect our brave armed forces to protect British citizens around the world in crises like this. But that includes tax exiles like Isabel Oakeshott and washed-up old footballers who mock ordinary people who stay in the UK and pay our taxes here. So as we protect them, does the Prime Minister agree that it is only right for tax exiles to start paying taxes to fund our armed forces, just like the rest of us do?
Well, can I thank you for his question and agree that the response of Iran has been outrageous, particularly hitting countries which played no part in the strikes on them. We have had extensive discussions with the United States at all levels, including the military-to-military level, continually over the course of the weekend. We deliberately took the decision not to join the offensive strikes that were carried out by the US and Israel. We did take the decision to take defensive action, firstly ourselves on Saturday with putting pilots in the sky, and secondly by allowing the bases to be used for purely defensive reasons. And we clearly set out the legal basis upon which we took the second of those decisions. And in relation to the limits, they are limited to defence, and that is the base upon which we've agreed the basing. And in relation to his last point, I want to be clear that it is my duty, our duty, to protect all UK nationals in the region, and we will endeavour to do everything we can in order to do so.
Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tamanji Singh Desai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Iranian regime, including its late leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, are of course no friends of our country, but I thank the Prime Minister for clarifying that the UK had no involvement in the Israeli and US strikes on Iran. And indeed, my heartfelt condolences to all those who have sadly lost loved ones in the region thus far. And I'm extremely concerned about the safety of the millions of people in the region, including the thousands of Brits who are living there and currently stranded there. So can the Prime Minister please confirm what steps are being taken to ensure their safety, especially from the one-way attack drones? What steps are being taken to help evacuate those Brits who are stranded and want to come back to the UK? And what steps are being taken with our allies to help de-escalate the situation?
In relation to the protection of our citizens, obviously we're still operating and we will continue operating defensively in the air in the region, taking out the missiles and the drones and the strikes, and we have permitted the US basing specifically for the purpose of taking out Iran's ability to launch the strikes in the first place, and the US has the capability to do that in particular. On the question of our citizens and their desire, understandably, to return home as swiftly and safely as possible, we're doing all that we can, working very closely with our partners in the region, and I would ask all those in the region to register their presence so we can give them the best advice as quickly as possible as to how we can keep them safe and bring them home as quickly as possible.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
Whilst many of us believe that we should be guided by the law of national self-interest, not so-called international law, does the Prime Minister agree that we are right to be cautious in this matter, that the British public will warmly support him in defending British people and bases, but they're very sceptical about being dragged into the cesspit of Middle East politics. They remember Iraq, which some of us voted against. They remember all the arguments about weapons of mass destruction. What evidence, actually, is there that Iran was on the cusp of acquiring nuclear weapons? And since when has regime change from the skies ever changed the regime?
Let me thank him for his question. This government does not believe in regime change from the skies, and I thank him for his question. The lessons of history have taught us that it is important when we make decisions like this that we establish there is a lawful basis for what the United Kingdom is doing. That is one of the lessons from Iraq. And that there's a viable, thought-through plan with an objective that can be achieved or has a viable prospect of being achieved. That is the principles that I applied to the decisions that I made over the weekend. They're the principles I applied to the decision not to get involved in the offensive strikes of the US and Israel. They're also the principles I applied separately to the separate decision and a separate request from the US to be able to take defensive action in order to hit the launchers for the missiles that are currently going into allies, countries in the region, and currently threatening our citizens and our service personnel. And I stand by both of those decisions. I repeat, I am not prepared to commit our military service people to action unless I am sure that what they're doing is lawful and has a viable basis. We can discuss what the law is on another occasion, but the law is what it is, and they deserve to know that their Prime Minister cares and pays attention to whether what I'm asking them to do is lawful, and I will always do that.
Diane Abbott, Mother of the House.
The Prime Minister will be aware that very many of our constituents remember the Iraq War, and they will have noted the similarities between this war and the Iraq War, both in the Middle East and both illegal. Of course, this regime, the current regime in Iran, is a horrible regime, violent, murderous, and a threat to international order. But does he accept that our constituents are not prepared to see this country dragged into another war in the nature of the Iraq War?
Can I thank her and assure her that we do need and have learnt the lessons of Iraq, which is why I've been so clear there must be a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. In relation to our nationals, I think everybody and all of our constituents would expect our government to take action to protect British nationals. We have 300 British nationals in the region. They are at risk. We've already seen strikes on hotels and airport hotels where our British nationals have been staying. We've had strikes near military bases within hundreds of yards of our personnel. It's our duty to take the action that we can take and will take to protect them.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the Prime Minister has outlined that the Iranians attacked a United Kingdom sovereign base at Akrotiri, why does that not form the basis for legal military action against the Iranians, not just hosting US forces on our bases, but taking direct action at source against the launch of such missiles, as we did in relation to the Iranian proxies, the Houthis, in previous conflicts that he supported? Moreover, given the Iranians' ability to exercise malign influence on the streets of this country, what reassurances can he give the House and the public at large about coordination across our intelligence and security capabilities to address this heightened threat on our streets?
In relation to the second point, can I tell him there is coordination going on for that very reason? As I set out in my statement, there have been 20 Iranian-backed plots to take action on our streets, all of which have been thwarted, and I pay my respect to our security and intelligence services in the work that they do. In relation to the point he makes. There were two separate decisions made over the weekend. We are in the sky taking action defensively on our allies. Among the reasons we agreed to the request from the US yesterday is because they have the capability to take the missile launchers out in Iran, and that is why we gave them the permission to use our bases in order to reduce the threat to our citizens.
OK, so the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer saying he stands by his decision not to have the UK get involved in initial strikes on Iran, something President Trump has expressed his disagreement with. Sir Keir Starmer said it was in the UK's national interest to take that decision. We're going to explore that a lot more. And let's speak right now to Sir Richard Dalton, former UK ambassador to Iran. And Sir Richard, I'll get you just to reflect on that point I was making about Keir Starmer's comments in the House of Commons.
He is walking a fine line. Clearly, there's a strong domestic political interest in not sitting on your hands when British citizens in such large numbers are at risk. And Britain also wants to be seen as a reliable partner in arms sales and other economic dealings with partners in the Gulf. The risk is, of course, that the Iranians won't distinguish between attacks by Iran and Israel on its political, economic and military infrastructure against the very life of the Iranian government and attacks on its missile launchers. We are not complicit in the original decisions to go to war against Iran, but there's a risk that the Iranians will regard us as now complicit.
Is sitting on that fine line sustainable for the UK? Briefly, though, is there a strong possibility, in your view, that the UK will get drawn further into this conflict?
No. The Prime Minister's enunciation of the principles on which he would authorise military action by our forces could not have been clearer. They were admirably stated. They reflect the lessons of Iraq. And I personally would rule out him going back on those undertakings. We are not going to be drawn into another Iraq.
So, Richard, we're just seeing that Qatar has shot down 2 Su-24 aircraft coming from Iran. That's from the Qatari Defence Ministry, without providing any further details at the moment. What do you think the capabilities of Iran are at the moment?
I don't know. What is happening is that Iran is doing exactly what it said it would do if it were attacked, namely make it everyone's problem. They wish to inflict pain and disruption, and within their capabilities, that is what they are doing.
By making it everyone's problem, though, aren't they potentially hastening the end of the current leadership?
Possibly, yes, but they are already fighting for their lives against 2 nuclear-armed countries with overwhelming force available to them. Their strategy is to inflict such a degree of pain and disruption and extra cost in a short period of time that pressures will mount for a ceasefire. I mean, that is the point that's missing from the British government's position. They are not working with other countries to achieve an early ceasefire. And meanwhile, the costs in the world economy to the British consumer, amongst others, are mounting. We live in a totally interconnected world. The Americans may have brushed that aside in their decisions to go to war and inflict this war of choice on the rest of us. But as the days go by, it will be clearer that the need to preserve the rules of international order against aggression, against the unilateral decision of strong nations to use force against smaller nations, against using diplomacy deceptively while preparing an attack, is all the more important. It's not just to keep the peace, but it's to preserve the interconnectedness of the world on which everyone's prosperity depends. So again, we need stronger voices in the United Kingdom political system in favor of a ceasefire and of going back to what Mr. Carney said, although he hasn't followed up in practice, should be an alliance of the middle-ranking powers to try and re-establish the validity of the basic rules of international order.
Just finally, Sir Richard, if I may, and briefly, if you would, could you envisage a Venezuela-type scenario emerging from Iran, i.e. someone from within the current hierarchy emerging as a person who would work with the United States and others, because Donald Trump has speculated about that, hasn't he? He's also talked about the people of Iran rising up and taking over the government in some way. So it's not exactly clear what his preferred solution is, or indeed whether the US's preferred solution matches up with what Israel wants.
Absolutely. It is possible to envisage takeover of the Islamic Republic either inside or outside its current institutions and constitution by political forces that want a more pragmatic relationship with world powers and with the neighbours, and to institute a period in which there is more peace and security. But it's also possible to envisage the fall of the Islamic Republic and its replacement with a period of chaos. The desired scenario of the fall of the Islamic Republic, together with a move to representative government and freedoms, you can't exclude that, but it's not looking the most likely outcome at the moment.
OK, Sir Richard Dalton, former UK ambassador to Iran. Thank you very much for your time. Very good to get your thoughts on this developing story today.
Thank you.
Well, that's the view from here in the UK. Let's cross live now to the White House. My colleague Katrina Perry is there. And Katrina, we are expecting, I understand, to hear from President Trump very soon.
We are indeed, Anita, and viewers will just see on the side of their screen there a live shot inside the East Room here at the White House. President Trump will be appearing there in public in front of TV cameras in a live scenario for the first time since he authorised those US strikes on Iran in the early hours of Saturday morning. We know now that he actually took the decision on Friday afternoon. The mission began several hours later in the early hours of Saturday morning. Since then, we've only heard from President Trump in 2 pre-recorded videos that he taped at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, where he was for the weekend, and then shared those on his Truth social media network. Most unusual for an American president to take their country into a war situation. And war is the word that President Trump himself has used to describe what's happening in Iran at the moment, even though he did not get a congressional declaration of war approval from the lawmakers on Capitol Hill to start a war in America's name, which again is something that's required under the Constitution. And there's been much political debate here in the US about that. Also, a lot of questions being asked about the legal underpinning for what the president is doing here. Many people feeling, lawmakers and members of the public, some of President Trump's most ardent supporters, in fact, saying that he hasn't laid out the case adequately enough for this mission in Iran. So we're expecting to hear the president address all of that when he appears before the cameras on that little picture that we're keeping an eye on there shortly. Now, in the East Room, the room where it is, the reporters and the journalists are quite a distance back from the president. So I'm not sure whether any of our colleagues inside there will be able to shout questions at the president to get answers to some of those issues that many people are seeking answers to. But nevertheless, we will hear from him, the White House telling us he will make some remarks about Iran there. What he's doing, it's a Medal of Honor ceremony for some veterans, so very much connected to that concept of what he has sent the US military to do today. And of course, we heard lots more about that mission from the US Secretary of Defense, or the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan K. campaign. They held a press conference this morning. Secretary Hegseth saying that the growing conflict across the Middle East would not lead to an endless war. Now, he did say that the joint US-Israeli operation in Iran wouldn't be finished overnight. It wouldn't happen overnight. Speaking at that press conference just a couple of hours ago, the Secretary said that the US goal at this point was to destroy Iran's missile capabilities, to destroy its navy, and to put an end to its nuclear ambitions. Now, he also paid tribute to the 4 US service members who have so far been killed in this operation. And he warned, as the president has himself, that more casualties may be inevitable. Meanwhile, in Israel, the IDF says it has carried out more strikes on regime targets in Tehran, with reports of explosions in the Iranian capital today. As this war enters its 3rd day, the conflict has also widened. The Lebanese Health Ministry says that Israeli attacks in Beirut and southern Lebanon killed at least 31 people. Israel says it was responding to Hezbollah attacks. And we can have a look now at some of the live pictures there coming to us from Lebanon, as we're also looking at that live scene of the White House, where, as I say, we do expect to hear from President Trump in the next few moments. As soon as he comes out onto the stage, we will go live to that and have that for you here. But first of all, let's just have a listen back now to some of those comments that Secretary Pete Hegseth made this morning when he was briefing reporters at the Pentagon, telling them that the US was hunting and now killing those who threaten to kill Americans.
If you kill Americans, if you threaten Americans anywhere on earth, we will hunt you down without apology and without hesitation, and we will kill you. President Trump has also been very consistent. Crazy regimes like Iran, hell-bent on prophetic Islamist delusions, cannot have nuclear weapons. It's common sense. Many have said it, but it takes guts to actually enforce it, and our president has guts. Iran's stubborn and self-evident nuclear pursuits, their targeting of global shipping lanes, and their swelling arsenal of ballistic missiles and killer drones are no longer tolerable risks. Iran was building powerful missiles and drones to create a conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Let me say that again. A conventional shield for their nuclear blackmail ambitions. Our bases, our people, our allies, all in their crosshairs. Iran had a conventional gun to our head as they tried to lie their way to a nuclear bomb. It almost worked under Obama and his terrible deal, but not under this president. Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America and death from Israel.
Now, as we've been reporting on, this conflict has widened throughout the region. We now see Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon exchanging fire. So let's talk a little bit more about Iran's proxies in the region. We can speak live to Bridget Toomey. She is a research analyst on Iranian proxies at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies. Bridget, thanks for joining us. We heard from senior administration officials over the weekend that one of the reasons why they launched these strikes on Iran was because they felt all of those talks about a deal last week, that Iran was just not prepared to deal with its proxies in the region. We see now this situation with Hezbollah saying it was striking Israel to avenge the death of the supreme leader. What do you see happening here? How far do you see that going?
Thank you for having me. The proxies are jumping in defense of their patron, and we're seeing attacks. We saw Hezbollah launch attacks on Israel. Iraqi militias are attacking the U.S. forces in the region, and they will likely continue to do so unless met with a force from the United States and from Israel. So far, the Houthis have been quiet, but they retain capabilities to target the Red Sea shipping and Israel, and we'll likely see them either indicate that they are going to join, or they may be moving to make independent decisions and sit this round out.
Just on that point, do you think it is that they are acting on the orders of the Iranian regime, or they are making these decisions independent of any instruction from Iran?
That's an excellent question. There are, some rumors that the Islamic Republic has requested the support of the engagement of all of its proxies, particularly there are reports that they told the Houthis to strike in the Red Sea, but we haven't seen that happen yet. These Iraqi militias have been eager to get involved after they sat out the 12-day war. So some of this was likely independent decision-making, but some of it was certainly requests from Tehran.
And does what we're seeing in Lebanon and what you've described there as possibilities into the future really just suggest that the escalation factor here, things could get very serious very quickly, more serious than they already are?
Things could get more serious, particularly if the Houthis join the fighting and should Iraqi militias look to expand their attacks. But these are all adversaries that the United States and Israel has taken on before and would be capable of responding to.
What do you see the likelihood is here of an immediate diplomatic solution, as has been called for from many members of the international community at this point?
Well, from the indications of recent U.S. officials, it looks like they're continuing with the targeting plan, the strikes. So a diplomatic solution in the immediate future does not seem likely to me.
So when we hear the president talking about potential off-ramps here, what are the options there, given what you've just said? Well,
the president and Israel are likely to continue, their targeting of the Iranian regime and the elements of its repression apparatus.
Oh, sorry, I think we seem to have dropped the line there, Bridget. But thank you very much. I think we got the gist of what you were saying there. Anyway, Bridget Toomey there from the Foundation of Defence of Democracies. Thank you for joining us here on BBC News. Now, we are keeping an eye just on that small little screen on the side there of the East Room inside the White House where I am, where President Trump is due to come out and award some medals of honour in a ceremony there with veterans and family members of deceased veterans of the US military. He is going to make some remarks about the operation in Iran, and we're watching keenly for that, because this is the first time that President Trump will be speaking in public in a live situation like this since he gave the order to the US military to join with Israel and launch those strikes on Iran. We know now, based on what we heard from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, this morning, and the Secretary of Defence or Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, that the president made that decision on Friday afternoon before he landed in Texas, where he had many public events and engaged with many members of the media and the public there. Didn't say that he'd made a decision on this, and it was several hours later, in the early hours of the morning, that those strikes began. Since then, we've only heard from the president in 2 pre-recorded videos that he taped in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, where he was for the weekend. So watching with a keen eye as to what the president will say here. We're looking inside the East Room there. You can see many members of the military. Where the reporters are is quite a distance from the president, so possibly unable to shout questions at him, but he is going to address that. We will have it for you live here on BBC News as soon as he comes in to the East Room. So do stay with us. I'm Katrina Perry. Thanks for watching. We'll be back in just a moment here on BBC News.
On a third day of coordinated strikes by Israel and the US across Iran, the war has already pulled in several other countries across the region. At BBC Verify, we've been continuing to analyse and verify dozens of videos and pinpoint exactly which locations have been hit. US and Israeli strikes have hit targets across Iran. Iran's capital, Tehran, has come under intense fire, often in densely populated residential areas. We've also verified damage at 2 hospitals, where you can see the aftermath of strikes. Panic and fear resound outside Gandhi Hospital in northern Tehran as we can see babies and incubators being moved. Among the targets hit, was a compound where Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was located. He was killed in the strike along with a number of other senior officials. Since Saturday, Iran has retaliated with widespread strikes, targeting countries across the region, all the way from Erbil in Iraq down to Doha and Qatar, where verified video shows an object falling to the ground, sending crowds scattering. Other videos show several residential areas across Gulf states being hit, like this high-rise building in Bahrain. And this is the view filmed from inside a flat. And a luxury hotel in Dubai, as well as an oil refinery in Saudi Arabia. We've also verified a video of an American fighter jet in Kuwait falling from the sky. The US military have confirmed 3 fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti air defences. The Kuwaiti military said the crew is unharmed. Now, Lebanon has also been pulled into the war. Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shia militia group, which has been backed by Iran, targeted Israel late on Sunday night. Israel responded with a wide-ranging assault. This is verified footage of the aftermath of a strike in Dahia, a southern suburb of the Lebanese capital Beirut. The Iranian Red Crescent has said hundreds of people have been killed in Iran following attacks by the US and Israel across more than 130 cities. But we've not been able to independently verify the death toll. International news organisations are often refused visas to Iran, which severely limits our ability to gather information there. There's still a near-total internet blackout in Iran. And countries across the region who've suffered Iran's retaliatory strikes have also reported dozens of deaths, and both Israel and the US have reported fatalities. As tensions escalate further across the region and more countries get pulled into this war, this moment brings great danger and uncertainty, and at BBC Verify, we'll continue to analyse footage as we get it.
As conflict seizes the Middle East, stock markets have plunged and oil is up. There's also huge travel disruption across the region. We'll be hearing about the impact on major airports and airlines. And we'll be live in Dubai, the most popular destination for tourists and emigrants in the Middle East. How will its reputation be affected? Hello there, this is Business Today. I'm Tig Enright. Well, a sea of red has hit the global financial markets today as heightened tensions in the Middle East rattle investor confidence. The price of oil is rising and airline stocks are the biggest losers across the board. More than 50% of global flights heading to the Middle East have been cancelled, but we are now learning that Dubai Airport is resuming limited flight operations. Let's speak now to Samira Hussain, our North American business correspondent, who's watching the market's reaction from New York. Samira, what can you tell us about how investors are reacting?
Well, unsurprisingly, as soon as markets opened for trading just a few hours ago, we saw an immediate dive, all markets in the red as they really assess what has happened over the weekend and the United States and Israel's continued attacks into Iran and the repercussions of that. And as you rightly pointed out, we certainly saw the impact on oil. And we're also seeing a lot of these kinds of what we call safe haven assets that are starting going to increase. So things like the price of gold has now gone up by 1%. Now, the question, of course, is how long will markets and investors be looking at this kind of uncertainty? And a lot of that, of course, depends on what we hear coming out of Washington.
Yeah, and when you look, though, as well at the rising price of oil, the potential for supply chains to be disrupted, given any disruption that there is to passage through the Strait of Hormuz, I wonder, is it too early to start thinking about whether this could start pushing inflation back upwards again, not so long after we put the last inflationary crisis behind us?
I think that is something that many people are looking at very, very closely, and what kind of an impact that's going to have on the global economy, which economies are going to be able to withstand any kind of increases to inflation. Those inflationary pressures, I think, are on the foremost for so many investors. I think when you look at the price of oil right now, it's at about $83 a barrel. Depending on how long this conflict continues, we could probably see it going up to $90 a barrel. And I had one investor telling me he would expect it to see $100 a barrel if you see this becoming a more protracted kind of war. But for the moment, I think investors are really just trying to digest what has happened over the weekend and what it's going to mean for the rest of the week and the next few weeks.
And, of course, it is notable that this war was launched after markets closed in the US at the beginning of the weekend. Donald Trump does listen to the markets. He does pay attention to what's happening there. Have you gotten any sense as to whether indeed market sentiment could sway his strategy in this war?
I think it's very early at the moment. I think, it's a Monday morning and investors are very much trying to assess what has happened over the weekend and what's may happen going forward. I think you're right to say that, look, the president does watch what happens on financial markets. And as we know, he pays very close attention to where interest rates are. And to bring up your earlier point about inflation, if we start seeing inflation starting to uptick, well, we're going to see central bankers around the world, including right here in the United States, that is probably going to have to take some action, a kind of action that is probably not exactly what Donald Trump would like to see.
OK, Samir Hussein in New York, thank you very much. We'll be talking more about the oil price in a few minutes' time. But let's firstly take you to Dubai, one of the Middle East's most important economic engines, acting as a regional hub for trade, finance, tourism and logistics. It hosts the UAE's largest population and generates nearly a quarter of the country's GDP, with its economy reaching 241 billion dirhams in the first half of 2025. And for the last 2 days, Dubai residents have been told to stay indoors as their city is hit by missiles and drones. Well, Ethna Trainer is a former journalist and an energy sector consultant living in Dubai, and she joins me now. Thanks for being with us, Ethna. Firstly, how have the last 72 hours been for you there?
Well, it's been rather loud outside and maybe quiet inside, Tig, if we want to look at it that way. I think it was a big shock and it was a big surprise to everybody in terms of the attacks on Saturday when they started here and really started without any warning. But very quickly, the Ministry of Information kicked into gear, really keeping everybody informed about what's going on. But I think what was more scary about it for everybody, I think, was the volume of the interception of the missiles, I think, which maybe was something, and of course it was something we were not used to. So what was happening probably 100 kilometers away in the sky was actually reverberating very locally, and people, I think, were seeing plumes of smoke. So it looked and sounded, yes, a lot dramatic. And it's not to underplay what's going on here. This is very, very serious. We have the US and Israel and Iran, not in a happy space by any means at all. And the reverberations around the region here, have been serious, and people are taking it very serious. I think one thing, though, the people who are living here have been very supportive. The government's been very informative about what's going on. There's a great sense of community everywhere we go. And I think, if anything, people are maybe getting a little worn out that the Western media is portraying us all as in total lockdown.
Well, yeah,
it's not. that bad.
On that point, Ethna, obviously there's a clear impact in the here and now. But what about the longer term? And Dubai has become quite the hotspot, not just for tourism, but for migration from the West. Could that be undermined, do you think, by this past few days?
Dubai has become a very attractive place for a lot of people to live. I've been here 20 years now, and I've seen a lot that has changed here. One thing I think we found, and you see it over the years, it's a very resilient place to be. It's Dubai, it's the region. We look at the growth that's happening here. I think you look at the trust that international investors have in this region here, and the government has done a lot to make sure that they're going to take care of that. As you say, nobody knows what's going to happen in this. It could be a long, protracted war. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen next week. We thought it was rather quiet today and tonight, and then later in the evening, there was another boom there. So people are being very cautious without a doubt. I think, yes, the international community will be looking on this region, but I do think in the long term, the growth prospects still remain in this region. The government will make sure that they will do everything to bring things back to normal. But for the time being, we all have to be probably a lot more cautious than we've ever been. But I think there is a tremendous faith with those of us who stay here. And I'm not, just sounding like maybe I've been in Dubai too long, but I do know it day in, day out. And again, I think it's a very resilient city, and the government will do everything it can within its power.
Ethna Trainer, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining us. And that is your business today. Do stay with us here on BBC News.
OK, we are going to take you back to Washington and keep a very close eye. Let's show you the live shot coming from the White House, from the East Room of the White House, where we are expecting President Trump to appear shortly, although we did think he was due to talk perhaps as much as 3/4 of an hour ago. So still waiting. Now, this is an event originally intended to honour 3 US service members posthumously with the US Medal of Honor. But of course, this is all now taking place in the context of those US and Israeli combat operations against the Iranian leadership. So everyone gathered there, all of us watching, very, very interested to hear what remarks the president might make about events in Iran and, of course, Iran's retaliation as well, and the impact that is having in the wider Gulf region and indeed beyond. My colleague Katrina Perry is outside the White House waiting for this as well. And a lot of questions for President Trump, inevitably, if journalists indeed get to ask some questions. Katrina, we're just looking at shots of the Defence Secretary, the War Secretary, Pete Hegseth. As I hand to you, of course, we heard from him a little earlier today as well.
We did indeed, Anita. I can tell you I'm standing at one part of the White House just outside the Oval Office, and the US Marine who usually stands guard when the President is inside has left. So that would suggest that the President is making his way from the Oval Office across to the other side of the White House to the East Room, which is where we're looking at now. Secretary Hegseth there, as you say, in the middle of the screen, and all of those dignitaries gathered there, as well as a lot of members of the US military, the various branches there. You can see them in their dress uniforms. So that would suggest that the President's arrival there is imminent. In terms of what we'll hear from President Trump in the next few moments, well, we are expecting him. We've been told that he is going to address the issue of those US strikes in Iran. We haven't heard from him in a live situation like this since he gave the authorization for those strikes on Friday. We did learn from Secretary Hegseth this morning in that press conference that he held with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane. General Kane is the most senior military official in this country, in this administration. We heard from them that President Trump actually gave the go order. He authorized those strikes on Friday afternoon before he arrived in Texas, where he gave a speech and he had many events with members of the public. He spoke to reporters there on a number of occasions. Our colleague Bernd Boozman asked him, had he made a decision on striking Iran or an operation in Iran? The president said, He wasn't going to comment on that. Made a joke to our colleague about it would be the scoop of the century, or words to that effect. But we know now the president had already made the decision at that point and had given the go-ahead order for this. It was several hours later, 1:15 in the morning, East Coast US time, 6:15 in the UK, when those strikes began. And since then, we've had 2 pre-recorded video messages from President Trump, which he recorded at his residence in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, where he's been for the weekend, talking about this operation and giving some rationale to the American public as to why he decided to go ahead with those strikes, particularly as there were talks underway just last week with his key lieutenants, essentially, with the special envoy Steve Witkoff and also his son-in-law Jared Kushner, who'd been in Geneva for those talks. There was supposed to be another round being held this week. But President Trump, we know now, felt that those talks were going nowhere. He said that Iran was stepping forward and stepping back. We heard from senior administration officials over the weekend as well that they weren't satisfied, that Iran only wanted to engage on the question of its nuclear capabilities, not to have any engagement at all on a deal relating to their ballistic missile capabilities or indeed to their proxies in the region. And of course, we're seeing one of those proxies now, Hezbollah in Lebanon, engaged in an exchange of fire with Israel there. So the American people and many of the lawmakers here, Republicans and Democrats, want to hear a rationale from President Trump as to why he has taken the US into this situation. The President and the Defense Secretary have used the word war repeatedly. War has a very specific legal meaning in the US here, and it's not something that a president can declare. It can only be declared by the Congress, members of Congress. That is set out in the Constitution. And we have not had that, and that is causing a lot of problems for members of both parties here and indeed some of President Trump's most ardent supporters within the MAGA movement, because let's not forget that this is a president who campaigned ahead of his re-election on no more forever wars, he said. He's going to keep America out of these wars. And here we have him launching into one. We're just seeing some of the invited guests there. We can see some young men coming in to take their seats there at this gathering inside the East Room at the White House. So we do expect the president to make some remarks on that. As to whether he'll answer those questions that many people are seeking the answers to, that's a grey area at this point. You can see somewhat from the setup in the East Room there. It's a very large room. Members of the media are kept quite a distance back, penned in up on a little rostrum with a very strictly guarded rope line that you're not allowed to cross. So you can try, and we always do, to shout questions at the president from that remove. As to whether he can A, hear you, or B, choose to answer them, well, that's up to him in any given moment. But it may be that we just hear those prepared remarks that the president wants to make himself. But either way, that will be something extra to what we've had so far, because, as I say, it's only those 2 taped messages, which is quite unusual in a scenario like this, that you wouldn't have a US president delivering a live address to the nation. Such a serious occasion, such a serious decision that he has taken, saying himself in both of those videos, and Secretary Hegseth said it as well this morning, that there will be American lives lost. President Trump said that's what happens in war, and we've already seen 4 members of the US military losing their lives in this conflict in Iran so far.
Yeah, and Katrina, as we continue to watch these pictures of the East Room and wait for President Trump's arrival there, it's been interesting to reflect on what we've heard from the Prime Minister here in the UK, standing by his decision not to get involved, for the UK not to get involved in initial strikes on Iran, despite President Trump's disagreement with that, and despite President Trump expressing his displeasure over the time it then took for the UK to decide that it would allow the US to use a base here in the UK, as well as in the Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia, to launch action. And people are standing up in the room. I was just going to say to you, Katrina, it's not clear what President Trump's end game here is in all of this as we see him arrive in the room?
Well, we're just hearing hail to the chief there, Anita. Yeah, there he is. That's why everyone's standing up. They started blasting the music here. We could even hear it outside as we can see the president coming up to the podium there in the East Room. He's there to award these medals of honour, but as we do expect, and as we've been discussing, we do expect him to address that decision to strike Iran. Let's have a listen in.
For nearly 250 years. From its birth in the wilderness to this very hour, we come to you now with grateful hearts. We assemble here today to honor men who, when the test came, were steadfast and unmovable. We thank you for the unyielding conviction of Master Sergeant Roderick Edmonds, who looked evil in the eyes and did not flinch. And we thank you for the battlefield grit of Command Sergeant Major Terry Richardson, courage that saved lives in Vietnam and courage that stands before us today. And Lord, we thank you for Staff Sergeant Michael Allis, who, in a final selfless act, made his own body a shield for a friend. Bless the family and friends of these great men of honor, O Lord, and forbid that we leave this place as mere admirers of their heroic deeds. Plant in our hearts a measure of their courage that we might prove worthy of the freedom for which they and generations before them defended. And Lord, now let the light of liberty continue to shine on our great nation. We pray in the strong name of the one who guides us. This will defend. Amen.
Thank you very much, Chaplain Green. Wonderful job. Appreciate it. And thank everybody for being here, and please feel free to sit. So before we begin this important ceremony, and there's no ceremony that can be much more important than this, let me provide a brief update on Operation Epic Fury. Today, the United States military continues to carry out large-scale combat operations in Iran to eliminate the grave threats posed to America by this terrible terrorist regime. Following our obliteration of Iran's nuclear program in Operation Midnight Hammer a short while ago, we warned Iran not to make any attempt to rebuild at a different location because they were unable to use the ones that we so powerfully blew up. But they ignored those warnings and refused to cease their pursuit of nuclear weapons. In addition, the regime's conventional ballistic missile program was growing rapidly and dramatically, and this posed a very clear, colossal threat to America and our forces stationed overseas. The regime already had missiles capable of hitting Europe and our bases, both local and overseas, and would soon have had missiles capable of reaching our beautiful America. The purpose of this fast-growing missile program was to shield their nuclear weapon development and make it extraordinarily difficult for anyone to stop them from making these highly forbidden by us nuclear weapons. We were the ones that were complaining. We were the ones that wanted it stopped, but everybody was behind us. They just didn't have the courage to say so. An Iranian regime armed with long-range missiles and nuclear weapons would be an intolerable threat to the Middle East, but also to the American people. Our country itself would be under threat, and it was very nearly under threat. I was very proud to have knocked out the Iran nuclear deal by President Barack Hussein Obama. That was a horrible, horrible, dangerous document. They would have had nuclear weapons 3 years ago, and they would have used them. But I'll not let that happen. For almost 47 years, this regime has been attacking the United States and killing Americans. Every time you see someone with missing arms and legs, or a face that's been absolutely shattered violently. It was almost certainly caused by an Iran roadside bomb. They were put there by General Soleimani, who was the father of the roadside bomb. Very proudly, he thought, but I terminated him in my first term. This was our last best chance to strike what we're doing right now and eliminate the intolerable threats posed by this sick and sinister regime. And they are indeed sick and sinister. Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon. I said that from the beginning. They're never going to have a nuclear weapon. They were on the road to getting one legitimately through a deal that was signed foolishly by our country. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders. And we thought we had a deal, but then they backed out. And they came back, and we thought we had a deal, and they backed out. I said, you can't deal with these people. You've got to do it the right way. Today, we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action and send our love and support to their families. In their memory, we continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is. We have the strongest and most powerful by far military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks, but we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this. Do you agree with that, Pete? I don't think there's anything, Mr. General. I think there's nothing boring about it. Somebody actually said from the media, I think he'll get bored after about a week or two. No, we don't get bored. I never get bored. If I got bored, I wouldn't be standing here right now. I guarantee you that, to go through what I had to go through. We also projected 4 weeks to terminate the military leadership, and as you know, that was done in about an hour, so we're ahead of schedule there by a lot. But please join me in thanking every American service member who bravely is standing in harm's way. They really are incredible, and I just want to thank you. We have a lot of them right here. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We have a lot of great service members here with us, too, in this beautiful building. Isn't it beautiful? We're adding on to the building a little bit. We're improving the building. See that nice drape? When that comes down, right now you see a very, very deep hole. But in about a year and a half from now, you're going to see a very, very beautiful building. And there's your entrance to it right there. In fact, it looks so nice, I think I'll save money on the doors, because it can't get more beautiful than that. I picked those drapes in my first term. I always like gold, but I think we can save a lot of money. I just saved curtains, but and it'll be spectacular. It'll be the most beautiful ballroom. I believe it's because I built many a ballroom. I believe it's going to be the most beautiful ballroom anywhere in the world. And when you hear all that hammering out there, you know why the First Lady is not thrilled exactly. She said, will the pile drivers ever stop? You know, they go from 6 in the morning till 11:30 in the evening. Can you imagine? Here? You know what? To me, that's a beautiful sound. She doesn't like it. I love it. You know what? To me, other than here, because we're donating it, not a penny to the taxpayer. It'll be under budget, ahead of schedule. It'll be $400 million or less. Most people say $400 million or more. No, it'll be less. But when I hear that sound, that beautiful sound behind me, it means money, so I like it. But my wife isn't thrilled. She said, this is getting crazy. I said, don't worry about it. We'll be all finished up in a few months. But now for the reason that we're gathered this morning to recognize the unsurpassed courage of 3 really incredible American heroes, 1 living and 2 no longer with us. So together, we recognize the exceptional valor of Master Sergeant Roderick Edmonds. And maybe I could ask your families to stand because they're beautiful families. I got to meet them. And please. So Staff Sergeant Michael Ollis and Command Sergeant Major Terry Richardson, as they receive our nation's highest military award, the Congressional Medal of Honor. And we're pleased to be joined by Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. He's busy. He's busy, very busy guy. In fact, I said, if you want, Pete, you can avoid it. General Raisin Kane also. And they said, we don't avoid this one. This is one you wouldn't avoid for anything, right? So we appreciate that you're here. Secretary of Veterans Affairs, who's doing an incredible job, Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins. Doug, thank you. You stand up, Doug. You're doing such a good job. 92% approval rating. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, who's known as Raisin Kane. I liked him when I heard that name, Raisin Kane. I said, if it's true, you're my guy. And it's true. It just turned out it's very true. He's a great guy and a great general. Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, and Army Chief of Staff, Randy George. Thank you. Thank you both, Dan. As well as Senators Tom Cotton, Bill Hagerty. You guys were great on television this weekend. I'll tell you what, can't have a better representative than both of you. Thank you very much. And Representatives Tim Burchett, Jack Bergman, and Nicole Maliotakis. And we have a few others sitting here, but I'm not going to go through it because we have far more important people to honor today. Oh, we have Tom Homan. I got to at least mention Tom Homan. I would be a stand-up, Tom. What a job. Zero people coming in. We had millions and millions of people pouring into our country now that, I'm not even sure I can believe this number is 0, but it is given out by Democrats. Democrats from the last, and they're rated for the last 9 months. We had 0 people come illegally through our border. Right, Tom? So I want to thank you very much. And I also want to salute 6 former Medal of Honor recipients, William Swenson, Jim McLuhan, Walter Marm, Thomas Paine, Sammy Davis. That's an interesting guy. Where is Sammy Davis? We have a big story here, Sammy. You've heard that all your life, I'll bet, huh? And Edward Byers. Stand up, please. You all look good. We all look good. We remember the ceremonies. All great. It's a great honor. There's no greater. I tried for myself. I've tried numerous times to get one by myself. I keep getting shut down. They say, you can't do it, sir. Bad protocol. Very bad. I would say the worst. But I'm only kidding. You don't have to say I'm only kidding. Otherwise, the press will come out with it, which they actually did once. Donald Trump wants the Congressional Medal of Honor, but he's been shut down. But now you are brave, amazing people. And I want to thank you all. In 1941, Roddy Edmonds of Knoxville, Tennessee, enlisted in the U.S. Army and soon rose to one of the youngest master sergeants in the military. In 1944, he sailed to Europe to fight in World War II, and he was so enthusiastic and young and full of vim and vigor. Roddy soon found himself on the front lines of the Battle of the Bulge. That was a big one. massively outnumbered by enemy forces. His 1,200 soldier unit fought valiantly until they were completely overrun. The force was massive on the other side, many times the number. After a 4-day death march, one that was covered very well by the history books, through bitter cold, they were put into a German POW camp. Roddy was the top-ranking infantryman in the camp. He was number one, meaning he was responsible for the lives of his fellow service members. On July 26, 1945, a Nazi SS officer issued an order over the camp loudspeaker, loud and strong. He said that only American Jews were to show up to roll call following this morning.
You're watching BBC News. We have been listening in live there to President Donald Trump appearing in public, speaking, making remarks for the first time since authorizing US strikes on Iran over the weekend. Just to recap a little bit for you of what he has said there, he said he wanted to give an Operation Epic. It is ongoing, what he described as large-scale combat. He said that this would continue for some time.
Major Terry Richardson, we are honored to have you with us. On September 12, 1968, 102 brave men of Terry's Alpha Company were asked with securing Hill 222 deep behind the enemy's line in Vietnam. They didn't know it at the time, had no idea, but the area was totally infested with nearly 300 enemy bunkers and many, many enemy soldiers, far outnumbering them by at least 4, 5, even 6 to 1. As Terry led Lima platoon up Hill 222, the enemy launched an ambitious and violent attack, unleashing a withering fire of machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. Just didn't stop, just kept coming. Pinned down in hell on earth, Terry summoned unimaginable courage. 3 times he exposed himself to enemy fire to rescue severely wounded comrades, and 3 times he dragged them back to the group. Terry soon realized that the 82 remaining men had one chance of survival. That was air support. Acting without regard of his own life, he grabbed a radio and charged up Hill 222 alone. He needed to be there. It was the only place you'd get reception. He withstood a storm of enemy bullets, eventually reaching the top, where he spent the next 8 hours calling in tactical strikes, completely exposed. An hour in, an enemy sniper shot rang out and the bullet tore through his right leg violently. He was in bad shape, but Terry disregarded that and pushed through. And after 7 more hours of calling in American fire from above, the enemy retreated. Later that day, his team found him with both eardrums totally ruptured and a mangled right leg and foot, but still barely living, but living nevertheless. Due to Terry's actions above and beyond the call of duty, 82 men, Alpha Company, survived this battle, including 2 in this room, Norm Meyer and Dave Himmer. Where are you? Can you want to stand up, Norm and Dave? Where's Norm and Dave? That's pretty cool. Pretty good. And that story is 100% correct, isn't it? Huh? See, pretty. It's how much have you paid him over the years? Have you said take everything we have? We wouldn't be here, right? That's great. That's a great story, Terry. Today you enter the ranks of the bravest warriors ever to stride the face of the earth. Please stand up, please. Thank you. That's great, Tara. That's a great, brave man. I met him back there. He said, he's central casting. Look at him. He looks great. He looks great. You feel like fighting? I think we could take him today. What do you think, Pete? We'll make a little deal with him, as you are a brave man. Finally, we honor one more American soldier, a fallen warrior of wars, and really a terror. Staff Sergeant Michael Ollis, born in 1988 on Staten Island. Michael grew up seeing the World Trade Center across the bay. I know Staten Island so well. The people in Staten Island are amazing. After 9/11, Michael enlisted in the Army, and by 24 years old, he was locked in. He loved it. He wanted it so badly. He was a squad leader serving in Afghanistan with the 2nd Battalion, 22nd Infantry Regiment, 1st Brigade Combat Team of the legendary 10th Mountain Division. On August 28, 2013, terrorists detonated a 400-pound car bomb on the east wall of the forward operating base, Ghazni, ripping open a 60-foot wide breach into a compound that housed NATO coalition forces, a lot of them. 10 Taliban fighters wearing suicide vests swarmed through. From across the compound, Michael saw the pillar of white smoke rising and ran to join the fight, rushing without his gear, wearing almost no gear, no Kevlar helmet, no body armor, just one magazine in his rifle. Along the way, he encountered a Polish soldier, and together they advanced under heavy fire, very, very heavy fire. At one point, shrapnel ripped through the Polish soldier's legs, rendering him unable to walk, very, very severely hurt. In that chaos of gunfire, explosions, and charred human remains, a terrorist insurgent appeared, rounding a corner with his suicide vest, fully armed, and you could see it. It was going to happen. He charged the wounded Polish soldier without hesitation. Michael raised his gun and forced himself between the insurgent and the man he just met, shielding him with his own body. He knew it was going to happen. He shielded him with his own body. You know, bravery's amazing. You never really know who's brave, who's not, until they're really tested. We think some people are brave, Pete, and they're not. We think others aren't, and they are. You never know. But he was tested. That's called the ultimate test, right? And at perhaps his final heartbeat, Michael fired his weapon, and the terrorist detonated his vest simultaneously. Staff Sergeant Ollis was killed just weeks before his 25th birthday, and nobody was any more brave than that. In his final act on earth, Michael absorbed the blast, sparing the life of that Polish warrior, who we are grateful to have in the room with us today, Second Lieutenant Carol Sierpika. Carol Sierpika. Where are you, Carol? Hey. Would you like to come up? Please. Please. I'd love to have you come up. Thank you, Carol.
Mr. President, Minister of War, my Minister Polish of National Defense, distinguished guests, everyone gathered here today, dear my Basia, Michael, and Jacob, especially dear Linda and Robert, and the entire Ollis family. What do you have that you did not receive? This is how I would like to begin these few words, to speak to you all here. In this special place and on occasion of this incredibly important ceremony, one that is significant for many, but truly especially exceptional for me. It's a particular privilege and a great honor. Above all, however, it is my commitment. It is a part of my new mission, which began 13 years ago. A soldier is not something you are from time to time. It is who you are forever. It is just like you are not a mother, a father, a sister, and brother, or only for a moment. These are not roles given to us for a while. They are a great gift, but also a great lifelong commitment. Yes, today my commitment and my greatest gift is to cultivate the memory of true, heroic act of courage that I witnessed performed by your beloved son, Michael. Please forgive me if my words have not fully captured what I truly feel today. However, sometimes words are simply not enough. I'm deeply moved, happy, and grateful to God for my service, for my parents, for my family, for my beloved homeland, Poland, for my second family from Staten Island, and for my second homeland, America. God bless you all. Michael, thank you for your service, and I will see you in our heavenly homeland. Thank you for your service. Thank you so much.
And Carol is joined by his wife and their two wonderful sons, Jacob and Michael. Michael is named after the American hero who saved his father's life. So stand up, Michael. Let me see. That's great. We're also pleased to be joined by several members of the Polish government, including representatives of the president, who I think is a fantastic man, by the way. I must be honest with you. I endorsed him and he won, and he came from behind, he won, and he was the biggest story in Europe, and he's going to be a great president. He already is. But as well as Poland's Minister of Defense, to honor the blood and sacrifice that has helped seal the Polish-American bond. We have a great bond. We have a great relationship with your country. And I just want to thank you to Michael's parents, Bob and Linda. Your son's selflessness in the face of real evil reminds us of the courage that keeps our country free. And I just said the genetics in that family are very strong, right? I said that before. All three families, I said, good. I see some of the young ones today. And I said, you have good genes. They were asking me, what does that mean? I said, don't worry about it. You'll figure it out. But you have the best genes you can have, actually. So thank you for giving America your beloved son. And now I would like to ask the military aide to come forward and read the citations, and then we will do the honors. Thank you all very much. This is a tremendous honor for me to be here. Thank you. Please, military aide.
Chris Edmonds, accepting on behalf of his father, Master Sergeant Roderick W. Edmonds. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, March 3, 1863, has posthumously awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Master Sergeant Roderick W. Edmonds, United States Army. Master Sergeant Roderick W. Edmonds distinguished himself by acts of gallantry above and beyond the call of duty from January 27, 1945 to March 30, 1945 as a prisoner of war in Germany. Upon arrival at Stalag 9A in Zietenhain, Germany, on the evening of January 26, 1945, the Germans announced that only Jewish American prisoners would fall out for roll call the following morning at the threat of execution. Master Sergeant Edmonds directed his senior leaders to have all 1,200 American prisoners present themselves for roll call. The Nazi commandant became incredulous after realizing that so many Americans were standing in formation. The commandant removed his pistol, pressed it hard against Master Sergeant Edmonds' forehead between his eyes, and demanded that he order all Jewish American prisoners to step forward or he would be shot. Master Sergeant Edmonds fearlessly held his ground, refusing to concede. The commandant lowered his weapon without further attempts to segregate the Jewish American prisoners. Several weeks later, in March 1945, the Germans ordered all prisoners to assemble outside the barracks for evacuation. Master Sergeant Edmonds ordered all American prisoners to form in front of the barracks, and when the enemy transports arrived, they would break ranks and rush back to the barracks. Master Sergeant Edmonds gallantly led these prisoners in a relentless pursuit of opposition and resistance, forcing the Germans to abandon the camp, leaving the 1,200 American prisoners behind. Master Sergeant Edmonds' conspicuous gallantry above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, in the United States Army. Command Sergeant Major Terry P. Richardson. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress March 3, 1863, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Terry P. Richardson, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Terry P. Richardson distinguished himself by acts of gallantry above and beyond the call of duty on September 14, 1968, in the vicinity of Loc Ninh, Republic of Vietnam. On this date, his company was tasked with the mission of securing Hill 222 in hostile and enemy territory near the Cambodian border. Staff Sergeant Richardson directed one of his squads to be the point element leading the way. Shortly after the assault began, 3 of the squad members became severely wounded and pinned down between 3 enemy machine gun bunkers. Staff Sergeant Richardson advanced forward under heavy enemy fire and recovered his wounded soldiers between heavy machine gun fire. By the time he was able to make it back to join his unit, his entire company had been completely surrounded by the enemy. Staff Sergeant Richardson recognized that the only way to keep his company from being overrun was with accurate tactical airstrikes. Staff Sergeant Richardson advanced to the top of Hill 222 under heavy enemy fire for better sight lines to direct the tactical airstrikes. He began to direct the tactical airstrikes and shortly thereafter became wounded by an enemy sniper. Staff Sergeant Richardson continued directing the tactical airstrikes for 7 more hours before the enemy broke contact. 6 soldiers from his platoon found him still alive. Staff Sergeant Richardson declined medical evaluation for his gunshot wound and requested that he be allowed to stay to lead his soldiers. Altogether, his actions directly resulted in 85 lives being spared on that fateful day. Staff Sergeant Richardson's conspicuous gallantry and extraordinary heroism at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army. Robert and Linda Ollis, accepting on behalf of their son, Staff Sergeant Michael H. Ollis. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress March 3, 1863, has posthumously awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Michael H. Ollis, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Michael H. Ollis distinguished himself by acts of gallantry above and beyond the call of duty on 28 August 2013 in Afghanistan. On this date, a complex enemy attack involving multiple vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, suicide vests, indirect fire, and small arms fire was launched against Forward Operating Base Hanzi. Staff Sergeant Ollis ordered his fellow soldiers to move to bunkers to shield themselves from enemy fire. After accounting for his soldiers, he moved toward the enemy force that had penetrated the perimeter of the Forward Operating Base. Staff Sergeant Ollis located a coalition forces officer, and together they moved toward the point of attack, armed with only their rifles. Upon reaching the attack point, they linked up with other friendly forces and began a coordinated effort to repulse the enemy. While under continuous fire, Staff Sergeant Ollis moved from position to position, engaging the enemy with accurate and effective fire. While fighting along the perimeter, an insurgent came around the corner. Staff Sergeant Ollis fired on the insurgent and incapacitated him, but as he approached the downed insurgent, the insurgent's suicide vest detonated and mortally wounded him. Staff Sergeant Ollis's exceptional courage and complete disregard for personal safety were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon him, his unit in the United States Army.
Ladies and gentlemen, please bow with me as we give the benediction. Eternal God, our unfailing light in every darkness, the rock on which we stand, as we depart this place of honor, may the courage of these heroes be our example, righteousness our choice, and hope in you our guiding light. We especially ask for your protection over our military service members who are protecting the interests of our nation at this very moment. And Heavenly Father, grant us the will to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before you. In your holy name we pray. This we'll defend. Amen.
And that concludes the Medal of Honor ceremony, where President Trump began with remarks on Iran. As you take a live look right here, we are expecting these cameras to turn off momentarily. I did want to share this with you, a live look of the exterior of the White House. President Trump discussing the very latest developments in Iran, as we were hearing from him, stating that this operation could last for 4 to 5 weeks. Before we head to break, I did want to share this live look with you, as one of them has actually changed. So I did want to share this with you, as we see Secretary Hegseth congratulating one of the recipients of the Medal of Honor. And we were hearing from Secretary Hegseth earlier today as he was discussing the very latest latest developments of Operation Epic Fury. We are going to just step away for a moment. We have a lot more live coverage to come. Stay with us.
If you go back to 9/11 and when Wesley Clark said, we're going to
Fox, I'm Stephanie Quinu. We were sharing with you a live event happening at the White House as President Trump participated in a Medal of Honor ceremony, but starting with remarks about Iran. I share this with you as President Trump now says the Iran operations will likely last 4 to 5 weeks, but also says that he's prepared, quote, to go far longer than that. We continue to follow all aspects of the developments out of the Middle East. And for more on that, I do want to bring in Tawfiq Rahim, who is a geopolitical expert and the author of Middle East in Crisis and Conflict. And Tawfiq, we appreciate you taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Tawfiq, I wanted to start off with the very latest from President Trump. He has indicated that Operation Epic Fury could last between 4 to 5 weeks. That's just a little shorter from the first timeline that he had indicated of 5 weeks. As we take a look at the developments and also the retaliation from Iran, but also from offshoots like the terrorist organization Hezbollah, what does this new time frame indicate, if anything, to you?
Well, it definitely shows that this is not, let's say, the new era of President Trump. It's hearkening back to, let's say, the past eras of war. People were kind of getting accustomed to this quick operation, as it was the case in Venezuela, 2-3 days, a strike. This now seems to be a prolonged conflict, and every week that it continues means that it's actually much harder to wind down.
We're also seeing continued retaliation from Iran, but also from Hezbollah. This is a live look here from Beirut, Lebanon. And we've seen plumes of smoke. And in fact, right here, this is a live look in the distance on the left-hand side of your screen. It's nighttime, a little hard to tell, but we continue to see some of these plumes of smoke. You know, what does this indicate as we see Iran continuing to retaliate and its proxies, at least Hezbollah, doing the same?
Well, I worked in Lebanon many years ago, and, this type of skirmish between Lebanon and remnants inside Lebanon of different militant groups, in this case Hezbollah and Israel, goes back decades. So that is not new. What could be new is that the central government has said that they will join efforts to crack down on Hezbollah in parts of the country, which could engulf the country into civil strife. So that's very concerning. And this is obviously a new front. So having this front very active at the same time as Iran becomes a challenge for Israel. And for the United States, perhaps a third front with Yemen could be added if the Houthis get involved. So this just indicates this widening, theater of the conflict.
And let's talk about this region of the world. We see now a vacuum of power in Iran. The foreign minister now indicating that they're going to be selecting a new supreme leader in the next day or so. But as we take a look at the issue of stability and security, what can you share with us about the ripple effects of what the killing of Iran's supreme leader and its top 40 leaders might do?
Well, this has huge ramifications. I mean, we have the immediate area of Iran and its environs in the Gulf, but then you extend the Middle East. The Middle East goes all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And all the way towards the border with Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so we saw that on Friday, there was that conflagration that was occurring. And then there's also other Muslim countries that are, getting into play. Like in Nigeria, you had protests in some of the Shia communities. So the ripple effects are quite kind of considerable. There's some noise in the background here.
And not a problem. And I also want to talk about the makeup of Iran itself. There are a lot of different factions and communities within Iran as we take a look at the larger landscape of the civilian population. And we've been hearing from President Trump urging and encouraging the Iranian civilian population to rise up and seize this moment for a new regime. But as we take a look at the makeup, is that realistic?
You know what? There is obviously a contingent of Iranians and a strong contingent that's happy with the assassination of Ayatollah Khamenei. But Iran itself is divided. Also, the populations are nervous. They've been there before where they've risen up and there's been a crackdown. And it's not clear that the regime is departing from the scene. So for Iranians on the ground to be able to rise up, they need to see that there's actually going to be a displacement of the military force. And even for President Trump, he's indicated that it might not be a wholesale regime change operation. So we are more likely to see parts of the regime stay in place, and the population is probably not going to get as involved. What you might see is militant groups, for example, in the Baloch areas of Iran, Kurdish areas in the north, activated that are more paramilitary forces that could start opposing the government there.
And Tawfiq, I just wanted to share this with our viewers right here. This is from the White House, Rapid Response 47, quoting President Trump saying, "Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities. Second, we're annihilating their navy. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of your border." You were just sharing that maybe some parts of the regime may change while others may stay the same. As we're sharing the quote from President Trump right here, what do you extrapolate, if anything, from this statement?
Well, these are the same objectives that were in place last summer in July. They're the ones that Witkoff and Kushner took to Geneva and have posed to the Iranians. This is around enrichment. This is around the ballistic missile capabilities. And this is around the proxy forces in the region. And the Iranians have rebuffed very significant restrictions around these issues. And I don't see any change as of immediately. And some of the new leadership, one person, his name is Ali Larijani, who's, head of the National Security Council, one of those bodies there. He's been tweeting and posting that he's not even ready for negotiations, or Iran is not ready for negotiations. They would prefer a long war. And so this is obviously the aims that President Trump has put forth, but there's no actually solution space as of yet. And that's what I think a lot of people are finding a challenge in terms of pushing towards an off-ramp.
How much, when you were talking about, one of those leaders saying that they would like a prolonged war, how much of that is based in reality and how much is that is political posturing? As I imagine a lot of the remaining and surviving individuals may not want to come across as being opposed to the former supreme leader.
Well, I think it's a matter of both. It's posturing for sure because they're trying to position themselves, and even if they do that externally, maybe there's some back channel messages that are saying something different. But you have to remember that the previous supreme leader was getting quite old. So the fact that he's removed from the scene means that there's new voices that might be even more aggressive than the supreme leader or might have a different vision. And this really becomes a battle of attrition, not of necessarily military soldiers, but of the supply of ammunition and weapons. And so for the Iranians, how fast can they create these drones that have very catastrophic effects but are relatively inexpensive? And how quickly can the interceptors in the Gulf countries be replenished? And they're being used at a very, very high rate, sometimes 5 interceptors for 1 missile or drone. And so while there hasn't been a huge amount of damage we've seen to oil facilities, airports, if those interceptors are not there, there could be significant repercussions.
And Tawfiq, you're the author of Middle Eastern Crisis and Conflict. There's been a lot of historical conflict with the Middle East, and oftentimes as we look to the future, we have to look to the past and the pattern of events. What can you glean from previous conflicts and, overturn of power in the Middle East, maybe even in specifically Iran, as we look ahead?
I mean, obviously, this goes back to 1979. You were talking about half a century. The book I wrote after Middle Eastern Crisis and Conflict, Trump 2.5 primer, I went back and looked at all the interviews of President Trump going back 40 years. And in his very first extended interview, it was at the time of the Iran hostage crisis, and he spoke to it. So this is something that has lived in the psyche of not just the American population, not just the Middle East, but also for President Trump going back 4 decades. And I think this is like that final moment, this culmination since the Iranian Revolution of coming towards some type of resolution. And so if there is a resolution, it could be quite cataclysmic. But as you pointed out, that region is just very difficult. And finding a way to meet everybody's interest, it's very complicated. And the one thing that always is the constant is unintended consequences. And every day that continues from here on out, that's what we need to be watching out for.
As we take a look at the next steps and the ongoing operation with the United States and Israel, is there one critical part of it that you feel like could be the tipping point, whether it's success or not?
Yes, I think if there is a leader from Iran that reaches out and says, I am ready to sit down, maybe not concede. If that person emerges, can show that they have weight inside the country, I think gives a counterpart to start a negotiation. I think the other thing to watch out for is if the Gulf countries, in a united way, alongside Turkey, come to Washington and say, we want an end to the war. If that pressure grows from within the American alliance, I think you'll see something coming to a conclusion pretty quickly.
And Tawfiq, before we let you go, is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewers?
Yes, I think we really have to keep an eye out on the hits on oil and gas infrastructure, the airports, and then one thing that people don't talk enough about is desalination plants. A lot of that region's water supply is based on desalination. We might not think of that as a first order concern, but that puts the entire population of the Gulf at risk if those are hit. And so one of those incidents could just have a catastrophic event for the region.
So is that what some of these countries that are allied with the United States are concerned about? And, one of our previous guests was talking about the potential for Iran to use cyber attacks to really infiltrate and disrupt infrastructure within the United States, but also within the countries of our allies as well. Is that something that is of great concern in the region?
I think think they have tremendous cyber capabilities, and they've deployed that, and I'm sure they're deploying it right now. But because a lot of their critical infrastructure has been hit, that may not be as possible as some of these mini physical hits that they're able to do. And if you look at what happened in Abu Dhabi, Amazon's data center went offline because they hit a power installation. So they're being very acute with where they hit. They don't need to do the cyber attack. They can go upstream, hit the power. There's not even any data. There's not any telecommunications going. And that's, we're not used to that. We're so advanced in our warfare. We're going back to these mini drones that are hitting centralized infrastructure, and people are not prepared for that eventuality. In fact, they might have over-prepared for cybersecurity.
All right, Tawfiq Rahim, we appreciate you sharing your perspective and expertise with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you, Stephanie.
All right, we're going to step away for a brief moment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. We are continuing to monitor all of the developments in the Middle East. Meanwhile, a live look here in Jerusalem as officials continue to monitor the retaliation from Iran, as Israel has been on the receiving end of a number of strikes, including one yesterday in Bet Shemesh, where at least 9 civilians were killed. Earlier today, we were hearing from Israeli President Isaac Herzog, as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu. Let's play those remarks for you right now.
Scene of havoc and terror. I'm here with the mayor, Shmuel Greenberg, mayor of Bet Shemesh. Bet Shemesh started here. It was a small immigrant town. This is one of the first synagogues in Bet Shemesh. The missile totally annihilated the synagogue and entered into the shelter because it was a direct hit of a half-a-ton missile. Children were murdered here. 9 innocent souls were lost. All night, the teams of the mayor were gathering the remains and the pieces. We pray with the victims and we pray with their families, and we hope that they shall find comfort. We're in the middle of a very important stage in history. This stage will determine where is the direction of the Middle East. There is a unique opportunity to change the trajectory. Rather than endless terror and havoc created by the empire of evil from Tehran, there will be change that will offer hope and peace to a coalition of nations which has emerged above ground and is fighting against the empire of evil. This is what we're seeing in front of our eyes. An empire of evil with its proxies, and I recommend not to any proxy, not to even dare think that they will start another war with us. We will not accept any more, and we won't let them amass their forces on our border, or instead in front of it an entire coalition of nations which wants to seek peace and change in the Middle East, which wants to go together in coexistence of Jew and Muslim and Christian. This is what we're offering, and I sincerely hope that this operation will move forward so that there will be real change. And we call upon the Iranian people. This is your opportunity at a given moment to rise up and bring change in the region so that we can all live in peace. And I will conclude by the incredible picture I've seen in London yesterday, in the streets of London. Iranians and Israelis shedding tears together, hugging together and saying we want peace. And for this, sometimes you need to fight. And that's exactly what we're doing. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, how do you respond to criticism from the UN that this is a breach of international law?
We're in the third day of... Sorry. This is the third day of Operation Roaring Lion, the operation the Israeli army and the state of Israel set out to, with our great friends, the United States of America and President Trump, to thwart existential threats to Israel and great threats to America and the entire world. When I stand here in a place that was bombarded by the terrorists in Tehran against innocent civilians, you see the difference. The tyrants of Tehran target civilians. We target the tyrants of Tehran to protect civilians. I've said for many years that they threaten not only Israel and not only America. They chant death to Israel, death to America. That's their ultimate target. But I said that they would also target those in between, that they would target Europe. They did. And if this regime, this terrorist regime of the kind we've never seen in the world, if they get nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them, ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, they will threaten all of humanity. So we set out to protect ourselves, but in so doing, we protect many others. And I want to say special thanks to our great friend and a great leader of the world, Donald Trump, for joining us in this crucial effort to save the world. Thank you.
Each day, sir, this war is...
Thank you.
Prime Minister, you spoke to the Prime Minister, you spoke to the Indian Prime Minister. You spoke to the Indian Prime Minister.
Yes, I did.
Yes. Can you say a word?
Yes, I spoke.
How was the...
All right, so that was the very latest from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he was visiting the attack site there in Bet Shemesh. We are going to just step away for a brief moment. More live coverage to come. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Stephanie Quinu. We continue to follow all of the developments out of Iran. And earlier today, the International Atomic Energy Agency was speaking about Iran's nuclear capability as they continue to monitor the developments. Let's play that out. And on the other side, my colleague Christy Mattino continues our coverage.
So good afternoon, and welcome to this press conference with DG Grossi. We will go straight to questions. Please identify your media and limit your questions to one at a time because we have many visitors today. So Francois.
Hi DG, Francois Murphy from Reuters.
Hello. Hello.
Moments after we received your statement to the board saying you had no indication that any nuclear facilities in Iran had been hit, the Iranian ambassador told reporters that yesterday Natanz had been attacked. So I'm just wondering if you have information on that, and if you could perhaps give us a clearer sense of what information you have to go on. In your statement, you mentioned that you're not able to reach the Iranian nuclear authorities. So, what are you basing this on? What kind of information do you have coming out of Iran? Is there a lag in terms of being able to verify this kind of statement?
Yes. No, I will not get into a polemic on that. We stand by what I said before. We haven't seen major military activity targeting the nuclear facilities. We have been looking at different satellite images. There might be something there, but not significant or comparable in any way to what we saw last time. This is, and we are getting information regularly. On the other thing, meaning the contacts with the Iranian safety regulatory authorities, maybe it is due to the interruption of internet services in the country. We don't know. But we haven't been able to reach out to them or for them to respond to the calls from our Incident and Emergency Center, the IEC.
Thank you. Austrian Television in the back.
Andreas Mitschitz, ORF News Austrian Television, Director General.
Hello.
Hello. You mentioned a sense of frustration in your statement this morning.
Yes.
Is this coming from being in Geneva yourself? You had the impression that the two sides are getting closer, that Iran is willing to give more than back in 2015 with the JCPOA in terms of stockpiling and enrichment. Please share.
Process that could not reach an agreement. It's a general sense of frustration that I think everybody shares. But in terms of the details, I don't think it would be correct. I'm not the mediator. We were there to provide technical support, explanation, because on occasion at the political tables, things are said, principles are discussed. But as I said in my statement, if you look at it, when it comes to nuclear agreements, principled statements are not enough. You have to define clearly what you mean by certain things, that you commit to A, B, or C, and that those will be verifiable. That was the sense of my comment. And it is obvious that there was no agreement, otherwise we wouldn't have seen what we have been seeing. But my hope is also, and I think praise is due to the strenuous efforts by the Foreign Minister of Oman and his team there that were trying to bring the two sides together. I was grateful to him for hosting us also in Geneva, and we hope that this process, or a diplomatic process in general, shall resume. It must.
We have a question over here.
Okay, thanks for taking my questions. Good afternoon, Mr. Director General.
Hello.
I'm a journalist of the CCTV, China Media Group.
Yes.
So at a time when technical engagement between the United States and Iran was expected to move forward, and the renewed military strikes have taken place, and do you believe these actions undermine the trust or narrow the space for negotiations?
Well, the agency is always prepared. We have all the necessary information about, of course, the nuclear program. We also have the expertise to determine how, as I was telling our Austrian colleague just now, to determine and help negotiators look at the feasibility of some of the things they propose. It's up to them to agree or to disagree on them. So we are absolutely ready. My hope, as I just said, is that we will be back at the negotiating table sooner rather than later. It is obvious that after this military conflict ends, and we all hope that this will be very, very soon, we will still need to have a long, durable solution, which will provide a sense of predictability, a sense of certainty for Iran and neighboring countries. So I think that is very important, and the agency has, in my view, an indispensable role to play in that process.
We have a question here.
Hello, DG.
Hello. Hello.
Nippon TV.
Yes.
Satsuko Inaki. I would like to ask you about the imminency of this attack, because the U.S. reason was that it was imminent. There was an imminent danger for to rationalize this attack, and you were actually in the negotiation as in the technical part.
Yeah.
Did you have the sense that the danger was imminent?
Well, this is not for me to determine, really. When a country, and I also, let me refer again to what I said this morning to the Board of Governors, the use of force, which we, of course, do not want to see in general in international relations, is a fact of life. This occurs. And those deciding to do that based it on their assumptions, which are not for me to validate or invalidate. So what I can say is that our assessment of what the situation was and is when it comes to the Iranian nuclear program is very clear and has been in my reports throughout. So this is my evaluation. It's an evaluation that is based on the fact that Iran has a very big, ambitious nuclear program, that we do not have the accesses that we should have. At the same time, I said it last year, before the June 12-day war, we don't see a structured program to manufacture nuclear weapons. So that is the assessment of the agency. Then, of course, countries have either other information or political considerations, which are not for me to validate, as I said, or invalidate.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Hi, DG. Jonathan Tyrone, Bloomberg
Hello,
News.
Jonathan. Hello.
You met the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. On Friday. The U.S. administration has transmitted a letter to Congress that permits Saudi Arabia to have access to enrichment technology and also plans to establish a bilateral safeguards agreement between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia that potentially makes the IAEA safeguards program subsidiary. Can you give us a readout on how you see that proposal being floated by the Trump administration in Saudi Arabia?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be reminded that this is a bilateral agreement. So it's an agreement between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United States. The terms of that agreement is for them to decide. We always, as a rule, support and advise on having for any agreement the highest, best possible standards of safeguards and verification. And there are many ways to do that, as you know. Argentina and Brazil had its own way to do it. Other countries do it in different ways. So we will, and of course, when they come to that agreement, which is not the case so far, so there is a little bit of speculation as to what are the exact contents of that agreement. When that happens, what we expect, and we are sure that this will happen. I have been discussing with Secretary Wright, for example, in Washington and in other parts. They are going to be requesting the agency to verify that agreement. So I would say, from the perspective of the IAEA, we are in a listening mode. We advise, of course, because this process has been ongoing, and if you remember, it goes back to the Biden administration as well. It's been a process that has taken a long time with different emphasis as time passes and the priorities of each government changes. So we will be ready to apply the verification measures that they request.
But just a quick follow-up.
Yes.
But just broadly, what does it say about safeguards that there's a force concentrated in the Middle East to wage war on one country over its nuclear fuel cycle program? At the same time, letters are being transmitted that would open up the fuel cycle to a neighboring country.
Well, a nuclear fuel cycle is a very legitimate thing to begin with. And for this agency, a good thing, because we promote the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. Your comparison in that sense, though tempting, I don't think respectfully applies, because we are talking about something that may happen, an agreement, and when that agreement happens, what we hope is that the parties to the agreement, and in this case Saudi Arabia, if you wanted to extend that comparison, will be in compliance, in full compliance with what they agree to do. In the case of Iran, well, we've had the problems that we have been talking about for so many years, Jonathan.
And we were listening in to the International Atomic Energy Agency speaking on Iran's nuclear program as we shared this here with you, this new video just coming into our newsroom from U.S. Central Command saying last night U.S. B-1 bombers struck deep inside Iran to degrade Iranian ballistic missile capabilities. This just being shared to X after we did hear from President Trump just a short time ago saying Operation Epic Fury will continue with large-scale military operations against Iran to eliminate the clear colossal threat that nuclear-armed Iran could pose. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christy Mattina. We are stepping away for a commercial break. On the other side, a live discussion recapping everything we know this morning about the Iranian strikes there. So we'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching Live Now from Fox. Welcome back. I'm your host, Christy Matino. We did just get this live feed in here as we are now awaiting remarks from Israeli UN Ambassador Danny Danon as he is set to be speaking here in just a matter of moments. If we do see Danon, of course, we're going to pivot. We'll head right there, bringing those comments to you here on Live Now from Fox. Now, there has been a lot that has developed here within the past 24 hours. And here are some of those major key headlines that we have been following. 4 U.S. service members killed in this Iran attack, Kuwait accidentally shooting down U.S. jets, and Israel striking Beirut after Hezbollah attacks. To discuss all of this, I want to bring in Rick De La Torre. He's a former CIA agent and the CEO of Tower Strategy DC. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. As always, Rick, we do appreciate having you on here.
Thanks for having me.
Before we jump into all of that, I want to talk about the latest from President Trump. He said this could last 4 to 5 weeks, prepared to go on for longer. But as you and I chatted on Saturday when this was all breaking, we learned that Operation Epic Fury had been in the works for some time. President Trump had also said today that the big wave is yet to come in this war with Iran, adding that Washington did not know who the country's new leader would be following the killing of Ali Khamenei. So what could that mean? What should we really be looking out for here?
Well, right now, at this stage, the goal is really to control the skies over Iran, and then to also eliminate any of the short-range or intermediate-range ballistic missile systems that Iran possesses. Iran has a number of different types of rocket and missile platforms. A lot of them are short range. Some of them are just simple upgraded kind of mortar systems that do have a rocket on them, but certainly very lethal, and they could strike anywhere within the Strait of Hormuz or along their coast or even allies. So not to mention drone packages and suicide drones and everything else that they have. So the first mission is really to eliminate as much of that as possible, and then to control the skies and systems over Iran. Right now, there is 24-hour imagery flying over Iran on some of our drone packages that allow us to get eyes on the ground and see things are moving. A lot of the Iranian missile programs were also mobile systems that were provided to them by the Russians and some by the Chinese. Those are a little harder to find, but now that we've got a lot more visibility as to what's happening on the ground, we should be able to take those out. So that does take time. That does take days, weeks to make that happen. And then once that occurs, then there'll be complete air dominance over Iran.
I did want to ask your opinion on that there, since we did hear from President Trump at the White House just a short time ago, the first time he spoke live there since we did see this all unfold on Saturday. Now, I wanted to put this back up on the screen. As I said, these are some of the headlines we have been following here, and I want to talk about Kuwait accidentally shooting down U.S. jets. So for those just tuning in, 3 U.S. fighter jets were mistakenly shot down by Kuwaiti defenses during an Iranian air assault. How does something like that happen in modern coalition warfare?
That's a great question. Yeah. So, in the thick of Operation Epic Fury, U.S. and allied strikes are hammering Iranian command nodes, their missile sites and proxy networks. It's not uncommon then for Tehran to surge a coordinated saturation package, and that's that's the number of their missiles and drones that could overwhelm the sensor packages, for example, that Kuwait may be operating. Now, that's just a fancy way of kind of explaining that there's a lot going on the ground. That doesn't excuse, I think, what happened. I think the Kuwaitis and CENTCOM need to do a better job of working together and deconflicting and coordinating the airspace over that theater, and prevent this from occurring again. This is sadly one of the issues here when you have so many moving pieces currently in the Gulf and particularly over Iran. I mean, we're talking, dozens and dozens of naval platforms, not to mention our military bases, and then now, allied support. So that coordination and cooperation with allied forces around Iran, and particularly the Kuwaitis, is what's going to hopefully prevent this from occurring again.
And we do know that all 6 aircrew ejected safely. They have been safely recovered, now in stable condition. But going off of what we just talked about, Rick, you know, what does this friendly fire incident tell us about how coordinated the U.S. and its allies are right now, and how can they coordinate to make sure that something like this does not happen again?
Well, it starts with communication and having that system set up between CENTCOM and Kuwaiti air defenses. Kuwait is obviously wants to make sure that Iranian missiles are not targeted towards them. If they mistakenly believe that our air assets are Iranian missile packages, then that's what creates these kinds of problems. So that level of coordination between the air bosses at CENTCOM and those at Kuwait needs to be crystal clear and worked out. And I wouldn't just say Kuwait. Obviously the Saudis and UAE and Qatar and Bahrain, they've all been sadly attacked by the Iranians, and they all need to work in conjunction and carefully with CENTCOM to make sure that this does not continue to occur.
We also heard from Iran on this. So Iranian state media claiming it targeted one of those U.S. jets. But how should viewers really be interpreting this? Can we expect to hear more information from the United States confirming that?
Yeah, I've seen. The internet's a great thing. I've seen some amazing claims by the Iranians, and all, of course, with AI and images of sunk battleships and sunk destroyers and aircraft carriers, all generated by AI. I don't believe anything that comes out of the Iranian regime. This is just simple propaganda. They don't have that kind of capability or sensor capability to be able to detect some of our best aircraft over Kuwaiti airspaces and actually act against it. The facts are clear already. This was a mistake on behalf of Kuwaiti defenses. They're going to work on making sure this doesn't happen again, and we're going to keep moving forward.
Now, I do want to transition to some other headlines we have been following here, because you and I were discussing on Saturday Iranian proxies. Hezbollah at that point had not become involved, but now we have seen Hezbollah has become involved there. So Israel says it has killed the head of Hezbollah's intelligence unit. From an intelligence perspective, how significant is that loss for Hezbollah?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. Hezbollah relies on its human assets and their networks that they have throughout the region and other places to provide reporting to them on targets, on soft targets, on what's happening on the ground, and then respond in some way. Now, keep in mind, though, Hezbollah and Hamas have been severely degraded ever since the 12-day war and all the activity that led up to that on behalf of the Israelis. So we're not dealing with the same Hezbollah or even Hamas that we were in the past, but they still certainly are a threat. This now provides the Israelis additional reasons to eliminate these terrorist groups completely out of that region. And they, knowing the Israelis, they will pursue this. They will strike, and they will strike harder and harder. They've got some exquisite intelligence as to the movements of not just Hezbollah but Hamas and other proxies. And at this time, I think they're going to action that intelligence and make sure that those individuals involved in carrying out terrorism in that area are just no longer with us.
And Hezbollah is saying it is retaliating for the killing of Iran's supreme leader and Israeli aggression. Now, how closely coordinated are Iran and Hezbollah in moments like this, especially when we are still waiting to see if other Iranian proxies like the Houthi rebels, for example, might get involved here as well?
It's difficult to tell at this stage because the U.S. and Israeli forces have done such an amazing job of decapitating the entire Iranian regime. So, the leadership of the IRGC, the leadership of the MOIS, the Iranian government leadership and clerical leadership, they're all dead. So now, usually my understanding is the Iranians have left decapitation instructions for not just the Iranian military and intelligence services, but also its proxies. To the extent that they wish to carry those things out, then they become enemy combatants themselves. It is the best advice for them to just lay down their weapons and surrender, and not keep fighting for obviously a regime that won't last much longer, and for a leader that is no longer on this planet. So the Israelis are going to be firm and final when it comes to dealing with any perceived threats. Their ability to take instructions and payments from Iran is severely limited, and I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out.
And I do want to transition back to home, the United States, here as we're taking a live look at the White House, because right now the FBI remaining on high alert to respond to potential domestic threats amid this ongoing U.S. war with Iran. And that's according to a senior FBI official who spoke to Fox News today. What we do know, Rick, is that the Joint Terrorism Task Force is also still on high alert. All resources are ready if requested or needed from law enforcement partners. And the statement comes after FBI Director Kash Patel said that the FBI personnel are fully engaged on the situation overseas. Now, I want to talk about what we saw over the weekend there in Austin, and I want to share this on our screen here as well, as this Austin gunman reportedly wore clothing with Iranian symbolism, and the FBI now investigating a possible terrorism. We are set to get an update here in about 40 minutes at 2 p.m. Eastern time. How do investigators determine whether something is directed terrorism or inspired extremism?
Well, it starts with the immediate investigation of the activity that occurred in Austin. My understanding, this gentleman, this person, I'm not going to use the word gentleman, this person came from a community within Texas that apparently has some extremist residents that believe in Sharia law and believe in bringing about Islam within the West. This kind of radicalization, it's unclear if it started here in the United States or was came in from overseas. However, what happens in this case is once the FBI identifies these individuals, or in this case this person, and who he is, then messages are sent out to the CIA and other intelligence services around the world and our embassies, wherever this individual came from. And then what we do is we try to work with the local services or friends of ours to get a little bit more information as to who this individual is, and were they getting instructions or information from a state nation or from a terrorist group. None of this actually, comforts obviously the victims, whose our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to them. But I think the important note here is that there are radical folks that use religion as an excuse to carry out violence against us. And they don't do it because they want to somehow, cause us to rethink our position in the world or to abandon things. They do it because they simply hate us. Notice it's a completely soft target, right? They didn't go after a military base here in the United States. They didn't go after a political leader here in the United States. They went after folks, just having drinks on a Saturday night out at a bar. And that goes to show you the level of hatred and just religious perversion that these folks have in their mind. Now, we are blessed that we live in a free country where we tolerate religious freedom, but we don't tolerate violence. And so proud to see so many Americans that actually stand up, condemn this, and just we need to be more careful and safer. As the weeks progress, there could be more of these things. It's unclear, like I said, if this was actually directed, if this was a sleeper cell type of situation, a sleeper agent type of situation. We don't know the answers to that yet. But we've had years and years and years of an open border. We had willing participants, even in this continent, in Venezuela, that had no problem generating and providing passports and identifications to known terrorists to enter our country and to live here illegally. And this is, this is a concern that certainly does keep me up at night, and I worry about.
Now, I do want to also share this post here, and just to remind our viewers, there is a press conference on that at 2 p.m. Eastern time that we will bring to our viewers. They're out of Austin, Texas. But when we talk about threats and retaliation, I just want to share this post from Fox News saying Homeland Security memo to law enforcement agencies warns of possible lone wolf attacks and cyber disruptions after Iran bombings. You were just touching on this a little bit, Rick, here. But what should Americans really be concerned about? What should they be watching out for?
Well, look, we certainly should continue to live our lives and go to work and enjoy our families and do, because if not, then the terrorists win, right? If we shut her up. However, having said that, we just need to be cautious and we need to be aware of our surroundings and report and work with local law enforcement. And if you see something, say something. There's no, if you're wrong, doesn't matter, you're wrong, but if you're right, you could wind up saving lives. So just have a good level of self-awareness of what's going on around you, and be very vigilant when it comes to those that obviously defend or criticize the United States with words of violence and call for violence. Sadly, that's something that is occurring, and Americans need to immediately condemn that and spotlight it so that law enforcement and others can take the appropriate steps.
Rick, we touched on a lot. Is there anything else that you would like to share here before I let you go? Once again, just sharing that graphic for our viewers of everything we did touch on here during this interview, in case you wanted to circle back, touch on something maybe we didn't mention.
Look, I think the next few weeks are going to be difficult. We've been blessed with some great military operations recently in Venezuela with speedboats off in the Caribbean basin, and then earlier last year with the strikes in Iran. This is going to be different. This is much more intense. This is going to be final for the Iranian regime, and that means we need to get it done, and we need to get it done quickly. Not quickly. We need to get it done correctly, and sometimes that is not quickly. So what that means is that we just need to be a little bit more patient. We will persevere, and we also need to be more vigilant about what's happening here domestically, because those things could be carried out.
All right, Rick De La Torre, we appreciate you coming on as always to break this all down for us.
Thanks for having me.
And once again, we are going to be getting an update at 2 p.m. from the Austin Police Department. But I wanted to share some comments here from Governor Greg Abbott as he spoke on this.
I'll take a few questions.
We've had the shooting, we have the election coming up, we have Iran. Are we worried about security, increased security? Are we going to try and do that for the election? No?
So you mentioned what's going on in Iran. And what I did immediately, hours after the attack took place, I made an announcement that the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas National Guard have already been deployed to ensure that strategies are underway to make sure that we're going to be able to deal with any terroristic concerns or invasions or attacks or whatever, whether it be to public safety or to the election process. Know also that we now have the new Texas Cyber Command, and we have the best leader in the country leading the Cyber Command, who is working with us to ensure that we will be safeguarded against cyber attacks also. And so I could not be more clear than to inform Texans that as long as this war is going on.
All right, we do apologize for pausing those comments, but right now we do see live Israeli UN Ambassador Danny Danon making remarks. Let's listen in.
We are hitting decisively, surgically, without apology. As we dismantle the regime, the Iranian leadership is lashing out in desperation. Over the past few days, missiles have been fired at Israel, most of them, but also the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, Kuwait, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, and even on European soil in Cyprus. This is not strategy. It is panic. It is desperate. While we strike military facilities and the machinery of terror with precision, the Iranian regime strikes civilians, families, airports, hotels, shopping centers, people's homes. In Bet Shemesh, a city near Jerusalem, 4 apartment buildings were destroyed. 9 innocent people were murdered, including Ziv, 3 young siblings, Sarah, Abigail, and Yaakov Beaton. Same family, together. Brothers and sisters killed in their own home. Overnight, another missile struck Beersheba, injuring more innocent people. This contrast tells everything. We target military infrastructure, they target families. They terrorize their own people, they terrorize us, and now they are attempting to terrorize the region and the world. We honor those we have lost. Despite the sacrifice, we are determined. We will not stop until we achieve our objectives. Look at what they are doing now without a nuclear weapon, threatening the entire region. Ballistic missiles fired in desperation, a regime striking widely as it brought to its knees. Now, imagine that same regime with a nuclear capability. That is not a risk we tolerate. That is a reality we will not allow. That is why the joint operation was necessary. We do not just talk about stopping the Iranian regime, we are stopping it. Meanwhile, look at what is happening inside this building at the UN. As Iranian missiles were hitting Israeli cities, the UN Secretary General's Special Representative for Children and Armed Conflict, Vanessa Frazier, she tweeted last night, condemning what she described as attacks on Iranian schools, leaving a large number of casualties, mostly children. That's from her tweet from last night. Horrible picture, indeed. She posted this graphic image where you can see families in Iran standing among rows of black body bags. I agree, it's a horrible picture. But this photograph is not from the past few days. It was actually taken at the end of January. The dead in these bags that you see were civilians killed by the Iranian regime itself, killed by the same regime now firing missiles at our cities. While this image is being circulated by a UN representative, Israeli children were being killed and injured by Iranian missiles. No tweet about them, no condemnation for them, no urgency for them. Ms. Fraser, if you wish to fulfill your mandate, condemn the Iranian attack that murdered Israeli children. But we know this is the UN. Accusations first, facts later. So I ask, where is the global urgency as this radical Islamist regime spreads its terror across the world? I will be clear. We will do whatever is necessary to protect our people, to protect our borders. Thank you very much.
What about a comment on the Iranian schoolgirls who were killed in Nanif?
Well, please.
Thank you. It's Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. We heard just this morning from the U.S. that there will be several more weeks of strikes. Are Iranian nuclear facilities within those targets? Thank you.
So I said it very clearly that one of the goals of this joint operation is to make sure that they don't have nuclear capabilities to threaten the entire world. And we all know that those sites, unfortunately, after the summer, they continue to develop them and to rebuild them. So we will do whatever is necessary to make sure they don't have nuclear capability.
Susan. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Susan Tehrani from WION. President Trump said that the operations may last about 4 to 5 weeks. I was wondering, is that Israel's assessment as well? Thank you.
As long as it takes. You know, it's not easy for the people in Israel who stay in shelters for long days. It's not easy for our neighboring countries. You know, I get phone calls from people who are stuck now in Dubai and other places. It's not easy. We all sacrifice, but it will continue as long as it takes to achieve the goal of the operation.
Mr. Ambassador, my name is Stella. What is your message to the people of Israel who are under a psychological warfare, meaning they're not sleeping, the sirens are constantly going off, they're in and out of bomb shelters, but they're willing to take this risk because Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, has been a threat for so many years?
You know, I speak with my family, with my mother, she's 84 years old, with my daughters, and I tell them, be strong. It will not last forever. You are making a sacrifice. But for the future of Israel, we have to do it. We have spoken about Iran for generations, and now finally, under the leadership of President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, we are finally taking action. The world will be a better place, not only in Israel, in the entire region, the entire world.
We have time for one more.
Victoria Churchill, Daily Mail. My question is, yesterday President Trump said that he was willing to talk with current Iranian leaders. Is there anybody currently leading in Iran that Israel trusts to take over ruling that country?
Well, I'm not familiar with what's really happening now in the leadership of Iran, but I can tell you one thing, that we expected that after the operation in the summer, they will recalculate their actions. They will decide to engage. It did not happen. On the contrary, from the information and the intel we received, we saw the determination to continue with the deception, to continue with the nuclear ambitions. So we hope that there will be new leadership. The Iranian people deserve better leadership, and we are telling them, we love the Iranian people. Mardumei Iran, we pray for you. We pray for your freedom, and I believe their freedom will come sooner than later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. What would you say about the school that was hit? You posted this picture here, but do you have any comment about the school that was hit during the U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran?
So I have seen different reports. Some reports show that it was actually an IRGC attack that targeted this school. I don't have the exact information, but I will tell you that we regret the loss of life of any civilian. And we pray for the people of Iran, but we have the intelligence, and we target military assets. That's what we do. The Iranians, they do exactly the opposite. Thank you.
And that was the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, speaking on Iran. I wanted to share this post here with you. This is from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He says, this is the third day of Operation Roaring Lion, the operation the Israeli army and the state of Israel set out with our great friends in the United States and President Trump to thwart existential threats to Israel and great threats to America and the entire world. Stay with us here on Live Now from Fox. When we come back, continuing our coverage as the U.S. Congress is about to launch a war powers debate. Our own Ryan Schmelz joining us live to break it all down for you. That's next.